A charming and spirited young mother.
Oh, she was so vivacious, like a little firecracker. She was sweet and loving, but she just didn't take any crap off anybody.
Is found strangled in her bedroom.
Whoever did this left her there with no chance to survive.
Police face a challenging crime scene.
There was no forensic evidence whatsoever. No fingerprints, no eyewitnesses.
This case was a definite whodunit case.
And a long list of suspects.
He had been hanging around her desk, and he had made some comments that really creeped her out.
She had had some troubled boyfriends in the past.
He didn't want to accept the fact that they were done. Their relationship was over.
You would think that whoever did it had a score to settle.
Until one big break reveals a culprit.
That one key piece of evidence was the aha moment in the case.
And it shocks everyone.
When they finally discovered who it was just surreal.
There's no rhyme, there's no reason behind it. It was absolutely senseless.
Just before 5 p.m. on a Monday in March of 1999, in the small bedroom community of Norcross, Georgia, police raced through the suburban streets in response to a 911 call.
The only information that we had at hand initially was there had been a person discovered dead in an apartment. It was her fiance that had called 911. When we arrived at the scene, we spoke with the fiance briefly.
The man tells detectives the victim is 20-year-old mother of one, Danielle Jennings. Her 2-year-old son is currently at daycare.
The fiance told us he walked in and found her lying on the bed, and he stated that she was cold and blue.
She was deceased by that point. She was face down on the bed, and he rolled her over and then called 911.
While Danielle's fiance is taken to provide a statement, investigators take a close look at the crime scene.
When you went back into the bedroom, she was on the bed, fully clothed, laying on her back, but you could obviously see signs of strangulation.
She had a ligature around her neck. The ligature appeared to be some type of stocking, and it was tied around her neck very, very tight.
It had been tied off to leave it that way. It's not like it released, which I thought was pretty unusual. I mean, whoever did this left her there with no chance to survive.
The ligature was knotted in the back, which would tell you that the person was on her back, behind her when she was strangled.
Detectives explore the rest of the crime scene, looking for clues.
The bed was messed up. One of the dresser drawers was open. The stocking that she was strangled with may have been one of hers out of that drawer. Her purse was dumped out as if somebody had dumped the contents and rummaged through it. It could have been a robbery or a burglary just gone wrong. However, there was other stuff such as cameras, miscellaneous jewelry that could have been taken, but they were not taken.
It was possibly a burglary that had been interrupted, but you always have to consider the possibility that it could have been a staged burglary because, frankly, there really wasn't a lot of disruption.
Next, investigators try to determine how the killer entered the apartment.
There was absolutely no tool marks or anything on the front door, and then there was a sliding patio glass door. It was locked. There was no evidence of tampering with it at all. We went around and we searched the outside, but we didn't turn up anything of any value.
Before they return to the station to interview Danielle's fiance, detectives fan out to speak with other tenants in the complex.
Most of the people in these complexes work during the day, and so most of them are not home. We left our business cards with a note asking them to please give us a call.
As the crime scene investigation continues, news of Danielle's violent murder quickly spreads to her family and friends.
When I found out that Danielle died, I said, no, I said, you've got to be kidding me. I said, this cannot be real. And then I dropped the phone and I just started screaming. I was just absolutely in utter shock. How does one handle the information that your best friend, your sister, the person that you basically love more than anybody in this world is gone? Why would somebody do this to such a loving, caring, beautiful person?
Born in Columbia, South Carolina in 1978, Danielle grew up with her mother and stepfather in Stockton, Georgia. Even in her youth, Danielle had a magnetic personality.
She was beautiful, strong, tenacious, ferocious. She was very fun. Danielle was always ready to have a good time, to laugh.
Oh, she was so vivacious, like a little firecracker. She was very tiny, but she had this big attitude. She was sweet and loving, but she just didn't take any crap off anybody.
Danielle showed her resilience when she was left to deal with an unplanned pregnancy alone at the age of 16.
There was never a doubt in her mind that she wanted to have that baby. She wasn't scared. I mean, she had brass balls of steel.
She wasn't going to let her age stand in the way of being a good mother.
Danielle gave birth to her son, Tristan, in 1996.
She was so proud. I could see her little attitude in him.
The new mother longed for her son to have a father and hoped she had found one when she started dating Luis Payano.
We grew up with Luis, so we go way back with him. We met Luis in our early teen years. Danielle was always partial to Luis, and Luis and Danielle were dating, and I was so thrilled. And the way that Luis would look at Danielle, like she would walk into the room and he would just light up.
Soon, the couple moved into an apartment together, and Danielle landed an office job at a landscaping company.
She was so excited to have like what we titled a big girl job. She was very proud of herself. We were all very proud of her, you know? She was going places.
In December of 1998, Luis asked Danielle to marry him.
She was so excited, and I'm like, this is gonna be the best marriage ever. When Danielle first got her engagement ring, it was too big. And I said, girl, you gotta get it sized. She's like, I don't wanna take it off. It was beautiful.
Danielle had everything going for her. She had a great career opportunity ahead of her. She had a man she was so excited to marry. She had a beautiful son that just meant the world to her. Danielle was really on top of her game.
She was probably the happiest I had ever seen her.
Now, all Danielle's happiness and hope has been stolen by a cold-blooded killer.
I could not even begin to fathom why somebody would do that to her.
Back at the crime scene, investigators are searching for answers.
The scene raised several questions. Of course, the most obvious was, how did whoever it was get into the apartment? Because there was no sign of forced entry. Was it someone she knew? We know, working off the percentages, that the person most likely to kill you is laying next to you in the bed. In this case, Danielle's fiance, Luis.
Coming up, detectives unearth dark secrets.
She had had some troubled boyfriends in the past.
He was violent. He was abusive. You could tell when he talked about Danielle that it made him mad.
He was just very, very creepy to me. And I know they had tumultuous fights.
The person that did it could have been amongst us.
And just as the case threatens to turn cold,
We felt like we had hit a brick wall.
I had a huge fear that whoever it was got away with it.
a stunning revelation points to a killer no one suspected.
The killer was much closer to home than anybody first thought. I don't think anybody saw it coming.
police investigating the murder of 20-year-old mother Danielle Jennings have their first suspect, her fiancé, 25-year-old Luis Payano.
Even though he's her fiance, everybody remains a suspect until such time that we solve the crime.
Investigators question the distraught young man.
He was very emotional, but romance can raise anger to a level sometimes that leads to homicide.
Detectives begin their interview by asking Luis about Danielle's movements the day of her murder.
He stated that he had been at work all day. The last time he had seen Danielle was when he left to go to work.
According to Luis, they had both left the apartment at 6:45 a.m., but Danielle went back into the building to get something. He tells detectives that Danielle seemed distracted because of an upcoming work meeting.
She was supposed to be having a meeting with management that day. She didn't feel easy about it.
Luis says Danielle called him at work around 11:30 a.m.
She wanted to see if Luis would have lunch with her, but he was tied up at work and he couldn't break free.
They didn't have lunch, and later in the afternoon, he couldn't reach her.
He called her at work, and then they told him that she had gone home at lunchtime, but she didn't come back from lunch after a couple of hours.
Luis tells investigators he called Danielle's cell phone and their apartment.
He stated that he was trying to get hold of Danielle and was not getting a response, and then he left work and went home to see if she was there.
Luis said that when he got home, the front door was unlocked, and that really surprised him because they were pretty careful about keeping the front door locked.
Detectives ask Luis about his relationship with Danielle.
We wanted to find out if they had domestic issues. He said that it was a very good relationship and they were very much in love with each other.
To verify his story, detectives call Luis's work and Danielle's loved ones.
Her family and friends stated that they were just a young couple that were very much in love and looking forward to getting married and spending their life together.
She had had some troubled boyfriends in the past, but Luis was on the up and up. I mean, he was setting up a financially stable life for him and Danielle and Tristan, and she loved him so much.
Danielle's friends are adamant that Luis would never harm her, and his alibi seems solid.
We were able to confirm that he had been at work all day through statements of his coworkers. As a result, he was eliminated as a suspect. Now you're on the hunt for other suspects.
With Luis in the clear, detectives ask him if he knew of anyone who may want to harm Danielle.
He brought up the name of Jeff, a co-worker of Danielle. She had filed a sexual harassment complaint against him at work. That piqued our interest a little bit. We immediately went to Danielle's place of work and we met with her supervisor and discussed what was going on.
Danielle's supervisor tells detectives about the young mother's harassment complaint against her coworker.
He was a middle-aged man. He worked at the same landscape company. He had a different job. He was in management. Danielle told her manager and supervisor he had been hanging around her desk and he had made some comments that really kind of creeped her out and acting inappropriately at work.
There was a big age difference between Danielle and Jeff. He was 40, she was 20. He had asked her out for lunch and she told him that she had a fiance that she loved, and he had made a comment to her that if he was 20 years younger, things would be a lot different.
Danielle had briefly touched base with me about the situation that she was having at work. Dude was kind of crushing on her and she was trying to get that, under control. But I said, just don't let it get out of hand.
She filed the complaint. I kind of admired her grit. She wasn't going to take it. The company was very responsive to her complaint. They took it seriously. They moved quickly.
Detectives note the timing when told of the company's response.
That day that Danielle was killed, she was supposed to be having a meeting with upper management about the sexual harassment charge.
Once we realized that the meeting had taken place that day, that was something that was suspicious.
Talking with the management, we found out Danielle was anxious and nervous about the meeting.
She was a relatively new employee when she made the complaint. That was one of the reasons she was so nervous, because his career was in a certain amount of jeopardy.
Coworkers state that after the meeting, Danielle went home for lunch, but never returned.
She didn't come back, and we knew that was consistent with the time of death. You had to think, where was the coworker at the time?
Detective suspicions increase when they learn that Jeff was out of the office and did not return until late in the day. Was this too much of a coincidence? Could he have killed Danielle as revenge for her complaint?
We definitely wanted to speak with him face to face.
Detectives hunting the killer of Danielle Jennings suspect a harassment complaint against her coworker, Jeff, may have led to retaliation and murder.
We were now focused on him as a possible suspect. We had to consider the possibility that he followed her home and ambushed her and killed her.
Investigators bring the 40-year-old in for an interview and ask about his interaction with 20-year-old Danielle.
He admitted to asking her out for lunch, but he said other than that, he had not done anything.
He talked about the sexual harassment complaint and pretty typically said, you know, I didn't think it was that big a deal. I didn't know she was that offended.
According to police reports, Jeff denies any sexual intentions toward Danielle.
He told police that whatever lapse in manners that he had had with Danielle, that he liked her. He seemed to be genuinely dismayed to find out what had happened.
Detectives ask if Danielle's complaint gave him a reason to want to harm her.
His first reaction was he was angry. He was adamant that he was not a suspect. And then he said it couldn't have been me because my truck was broken and I was on a job with somebody else, with a coworker, and I can prove it.
Jeff provides investigators with the name of the coworker he claims to have been with.
We immediately ran down his coworker at like 1 o'clock in the morning. This guy verified that he was with him all day till the close of business, that they were together.
With his alibi confirmed, police eliminate Jeff as a suspect. 24 hours after Danielle's murder, the enormity of her death is only just starting to hit home for Danielle's loved ones.
Things like that didn't happen where we grew up. I could not believe somebody would do that to her. It was just the most nightmarish thing I could imagine. It made me question God. Why would you let something that horrible happen to her?
I didn't want to accept it. I couldn't sleep. I just kept saying, she's dead, she's dead. Danielle should not be dead.
The following day, investigators receive the autopsy report and scour it for anything that might point to Danielle's killer.
The manner of death was asphyxiation or strangulation.
The medical examiner stated that she probably lost consciousness within about 15 to 20 seconds after the ligature was placed around her neck.
It seemed clear that she had been surprised by her attacker, had no time to move, had no time to strike back.
It's almost like it came out of nowhere. We knew from the positioning of the knot, someone had come up behind her with the nylon stocking, pulled it tight until she lost consciousness, and then tied it off to kill her. She had not been sexually assaulted. There weren't any other injuries. There weren't any defensive injuries.
This case was a definite whodunit case. There was no evidence found at the scene that could help us.
There was no forensic evidence whatsoever. No transfer of skin, no fingerprints, nothing a lab could look at.
After striking out with the autopsy, investigators revisit the theory that the homicide was a robbery gone wrong.
We don't live there, so we don't know what's supposed to be there and what's not. We asked the fiance to go back through the apartment with us and tell us what he sees missing. The smallest detail sometimes helps point us into the direction of a suspect, but nothing was missing according to the fiance. At that point, we had absolutely nothing to go on other than the stalking that she was strangled with.
Detectives ask Luis if he recognizes the stalking.
We wanted to know whether it came from her. It was a tan, knee-high women's stocking, and he said that she never wore anything like that, and we didn't find any in the apartment. Whoever did this brought that with them.
The homicide was brutal, violent, and vicious. It lent itself to a personal motive. You would think that whoever did it had a score to settle.
Louise told us she had had some tumultuous relationships in her past, so we pursued that angle.
Investigators asked Danielle's friends about her previous relationships.
When they first started questioning me, they were asking me a lot of questions about her boyfriends in the past, who I felt might have been able to do it. And then it clicked that, Eddie, he was a tow truck driver and he was a big guy. And he was just very, very creepy to me.
Her best friend told us about her ex-boyfriend. He was violent, he was abusive.
She ended up having to get a restraining order on him. With Eddie, no one ever really knew when he was going to pop up again.
That was somebody we needed to look at.
Two days after the murder of 20-year-old Danielle Jennings, friends have alerted investigators to Eddie McElwaney, an ex-boyfriend with a violent history.
We learned a lot about her former boyfriend. We learned that she had begun to see him when she was a teenager, when she was younger.
Friends reveal Danielle started dating Eddie shortly after she became pregnant from another relationship. But Eddie's behavior soon raised red flags.
As they got more serious, he became more possessive and controlling, and he definitely wanted to start isolating her from her friends and family more.
I didn't want to be around him. I did not like the way he made me feel. I didn't like the way he looked at Danielle. I mean, he would sometimes look at her with disgust. And I know they had tumultuous fights.
We learned it had been an abusive relationship, physical and emotional.
I mean, she would stand up to anybody, but as tough and as a badass as she was, I think she was a little bit afraid of him.
Things only got worse with Eddie when Danielle gave birth to her child.
Her family and friends stated that shortly after her son was born, Eddie was getting involved in drugs, and that was finally the straw that broke the camel's back, and she ended the relationship with that.
Danielle moved out and tried to start fresh, but Eddie had other plans.
She knew it was going to be difficult, but she didn't realize that Eddie was not going to leave Danielle in peace. He didn't want to accept the fact that they were done, their relationship was over. She never knew when he would turn up around the corner, when she just wanted to be left alone.
She had gotten a restraining order against Eddie because he had been stalking her. He had been driving back and forth in front of her house. He had gone to her work, and she was in fear that she was in danger.
We found out that he had violated the restraining order several times. He would call her, leave voicemails for her. He would drive by her house several times a day or night.
When police ask when Eddie last contacted Danielle, the answer is troubling.
Danielle's family had told us that within the last few months, he had been calling her, trying to get her to talk to him, but she would just hang up on him.
Could Eddie have shown up at Danielle's apartment the day she was killed, leading to a deadly confrontation?
I've seen a lot of domestic abuse cases, so I knew that there was a possibility that with his past that he could have done something like that.
Investigators track down Eddie and bring him in for questioning.
In the interview with Eddie, he was kind of belligerent and unhappy to be there and a little bit hostile. You could tell when he talked about Danielle that it made him mad. What we saw with Eddie certainly had all the earmarks of a domestic violence case.
When questioned about his relationship with Danielle, Eddie's responses raised detectives' suspicions even more.
When he was asked about the relationship, his version was a little bit different. He never mentioned any abuse. He thought everything was great.
We asked him when was the last time that he had had any contact with Danielle, and he said that he had not talked to her for at least a year or longer. We know that he's lying about that. From speaking with Danielle's family and friends, we knew in the last several months he had been calling her.
At that point, he's looking pretty good. So you have to determine where he was at the time of the crime.
Eddie tells detectives that he was working many miles away from where Danielle was killed.
He said that on his job as a tow truck driver that he had to go out of state.
Investigators immediately look into Eddie's alibi.
His boss verified that he was out of state and he was able to produce hotel receipts, gas receipts that showed that he was actually out of state at the time of the crime.
Whenever he responded to a legitimate call, he had to log it, and his whereabouts could be verified throughout the day.
That is a pretty tight alibi, so he was eliminated as a suspect.
It's another dead end for detectives.
Once again, we're knocked for a loop and we're back to ground zero, and he moves down the line and we're looking for somebody else.
It was infuriating. It was frustrating. I had a huge fear that whoever it was got away with it, because people get away with murder every day. I was really hoping that the detectives would find something, because you're sitting here trying to point a finger at somebody that you don't know who.
There was this air of suspense around everything because we didn't know at that time who had killed Danielle. The person that did it could have been amongst us.
We had basically eliminated everybody who was close to the victim. When you get to that point of an investigation, you don't have anywhere else to logically follow up.
With no more leads, the investigation is at a standstill.
We felt like we had hit a brick wall, and then we got a call that changed everything.
Three days after finding Danielle Jennings strangled in her apartment bedroom, police hunting her killer have just got a stunning new lead.
We received a phone call from a Miss Kirk that resided at the apartment complex.
The woman tells detectives about a disturbing incident that took place a week before Danielle was killed.
She was awakened one morning by someone knocking at the door, and she looked out the peephole but didn't see anybody there, so she went back to bed. And a few minutes later, she hears the front door open, and the maintenance man is standing there. The maintenance man says that he's there for a work order. However, Miss Kirk says she felt very uncomfortable the entire time that he was in there because he was always staring at her, like he was more preoccupied with her than he was completing the work order.
The woman cannot provide the name of the maintenance man, but she gives a description to police. Detectives head back to Danielle's apartment complex to investigate.
While speaking with the management at the complex, we found that there was another case similar in the past from a Miss Bruno that lived in the apartment complex.
Management told the detectives that someone had walked into this woman's apartment She had, of course, asked him who the heck he was. What are you doing in my apartment? And he said maintenance, and claimed that he was there to change light bulbs. And she said, I don't have any light bulbs to change. He kind of mumbled and stumbled, and then, maybe I have the wrong apartment, and he backed out and left. It was so similar to the other one, which of course raises our eyebrows.
The complex was big enough so that there were several maintenance workers, but only one closely fit the description given by the young ladies. That would be Calvin Oliver.
We showed a photograph of Mr. Oliver to Miss Bruno and Miss Kurt, and both of them identified him as the person that had walked in on them.
Investigators discover a disturbing trend emerged after Calvin had been hired 7 months ago.
Come to find out, there had been several burglaries reported where items had been stolen out of apartments that had no forced entry.
Could Calvin have been responsible for these thefts?
We learned that he had an apartment in the complex. The fact that he lives there makes it so accessible that he could walk around, not be suspicious. We also learned that the custodians had access to the master keys of every apartment. He has complete access.
Detectives search for any link between Danielle and Calvin.
We found out that he had done a work order in her apartment a couple of weeks prior to the murder.
That is somebody that you really want to look at. It went back to our original theory of if this was a burglary, then it had been interrupted. He could have known that Danielle Jennings was gone during the daytime, and he decided that day that he was going to enter that apartment.
Investigators haul Calvin Oliver in for an interview, but make the call to slow play their suspicions.
When Oliver was brought in for questioning, we didn't want to tip him off to anything about the homicide. So he was interviewed initially about the burglaries. He absolutely denied any of that. He said, I didn't steal anything, I didn't go into apartments. He denied any involvement in any burglaries.
The 42-year-old tells detectives that his intrusion on the two women in the complex was a simple misunderstanding.
Once we got around to interviewing him about the murder, the first question was, did you hear about this? It was kind of odd. You would have thought that a person who worked in that apartment complex and was there every day would have heard everything about it. He went, yeah, I think I heard something about it. I don't know much about it. I don't know that woman.
He insisted he knew nothing about, as he described her, that dead girl.
All he admitted to knowing her was that he had done the work order in her apartment.
At that point, we had a pattern of conduct going into apartments. We had the admission that he had been in the apartment, but we had nothing that directly linked him to the murder.
With nothing concrete on Calvin, detectives end the interview. But before they let him walk free, police run a background check and are shocked by what they find.
He had a criminal history of burglary and theft. There was an outstanding warrant on him for failure to appear on a burglary charge in another jurisdiction. That day that Danielle was killed, if he's in there and she walks in on him, that would be a reason for him to cause her harm because he doesn't want to go back to prison.
He had an outstanding warrant, so he was held for that, and that bought them enough time while they investigated.
Based on the burglaries that had occurred in the complex, we obtained a search warrant for his apartment. We're trying to see if we can find anything that would tie him to Danielle Jennings. We're looking for any type of the stockings or pantyhose or anything that would be similar to the one that we found tied around her neck.
Detectives find no matching stocking, but they do discover incriminating evidence.
We do find evidence of the other burglaries that have been committed in the complex. And then we also found out that he had possession of a master key for the apartment complex so that he could open any door on any building at any time, and he was not supposed to be in possession of that key.
It's only enough evidence to allow investigators to charge Calvin with burglary.
We concluded that search with those items, but nothing was found relevant to the murder. You really don't have anywhere else to go at that point.
We don't have a stocking, we don't have anything that ties him to Danielle or her apartment at all.
That's where we were until Luis called. Out of the blue, he said, "Do you have the engagement ring?"
We told him, no, we don't have a ring. We didn't know one was missing. And then he describes the ring, and then the big bright light goes off. When we were doing the search on Oliver's apartment, we noticed a ring on a dresser in his bedroom, but the ring didn't match any of the items stolen, so we really didn't have a reason to seize it at that time. We do another search warrant, go back into the apartment, we seize that ring, we show it to the fiance. He can't positively identify the ring, but he says her best friend will definitely be able to identify it. If we were able to identify that as being Danielle's ring, that would physically tie Oliver to Danielle and her apartment on the day that she was murdered.
With the entire investigation on the line, detectives race to the home of Danielle's best friend.
Is that ring the engagement ring? This is something we gotta know.
Investigators believe the key to solving the murder of Danielle Jennings is her missing engagement ring.
If we had that ring, then we had the killer.
Detectives have seized a ring from suspect Calvin Oliver's apartment. But is it Danielle's engagement ring? They hope her best friend can answer that question.
The detective and Lewis were there, and I said, "Well, what's going on?" And the detective looked at me and he said, "Leslie," he said, "do you know what Danielle's engagement ring looked like?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I do." The detective said, "Is there any defining characteristics to this ring?" He goes, "And I need you to be specific." And I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "It was bent." She had bent the band so it stayed snug on her finger because she wouldn't take the dang thing to get sized.
We needed to find out when was the last time she had seen her wearing the ring.
I said, "I saw Danielle the Sunday before she was killed, and she had her ring on Sunday night." And he takes the evidence bag out and he says, "Is this her ring?" And the minute I saw it, I knew it was hers.
When we had that ring and had it identified as being hers, we knew that we had the guy. We knew we had the right person.
Finding the ring was the aha moment in the case. And that was the piece of evidence that allowed us to charge Calvin Oliver with murder.
9 days after her death, Calvin Oliver is arrested for the murder of Danielle Jennings.
The primary charge was malice murder, and that means that you intentionally and unlawfully kill another human being.
Detectives once again interview Calvin, this time taking a different approach.
Once you have a suspect under arrest for the charge that you're interviewing him about, then the interview becomes very direct. He was given a chance again to tell the story where he denied any involvement in the murder, and then he was confronted with the evidence that we had.
We told him about the ring, and that's when he said, "Well, I stole that ring 2 weeks ago when I did the work order in her apartment." But see, we knew that was a lie because we had people that had seen her wearing the ring, so we knew that he was lying about that.
Calvin refuses to answer any more questions.
We told him that he was being charged with malice murder because you took the pantyhose with you into the apartment because you had intent to harm someone, and he said there was no intent there, which was a good comment to have in a statement. It's like he admitted to killing her without knowing that he had admitted to it. We were convinced 100% that we had our guy. This is the guy that was responsible for the death of Danielle Jennings, and that we were going to send him to prison for the rest of his life.
News of an arrest in Danielle's murder brings relief to her loved ones and surprise.
When they finally discovered who it was, the maintenance man in her apartment building, it was just surreal.
I don't think anybody saw it coming. The killer was much closer to home than anybody first thought.
When I saw his picture, I threw up, knowing that that was the man that strangled my best friend for no reason.
At trial, prosecutors present how they believe the crime unfolded.
The day Danielle was killed, Mr. Oliver had already let himself in, hoping for financial gain. After the HR meeting about her coworker, Danielle went home for lunch by herself. Once she opened the door and stepped in, he knew she was there, and he knew she could not exit again. He was not going to get caught.
He ambushed her from behind with the stocking. He came over her head. He pulled it tight, pushed her down onto the bed until she lost consciousness, and then he tied the ligature off, and there was no way for her to escape. There was no heat of the moment. There was no emotion. He killed Danielle because it made his life easier.
The jury hears about the prosecution's most damning evidence, Danielle's stolen engagement ring.
I had to be the one to testify about the ring because I identified the ring. I actually had to look at that man. I had to sit there and look at him. Calvin Oliver sat there just staring daggers into me, is what he did, and tried everything he could to make me feel uncomfortable. And I took a big, deep breath, and I stared right back at him.
There was no explanation for the presence of this ring in Calvin Oliver's apartment, other than he took it off Danielle Jennings' dead finger.
On October 13th, 2000, after a 5-day trial, the jury delivers their verdict.
He was found guilty on all charges.
The judge sentences Calvin Oliver to life in prison.
When the verdict came through, we were all holding hands. We just knew justice had been served as far as it could be. I mean, we were glad, but it still wasn't gonna bring her back. Her mom was never the same again. It destroyed her. That horrible man took away an angel that was put here. She was a huge light to me, to her fiance, to her son. She was everything to a lot of people. To this day, I still dream of her. There's not a day that goes by that I don't miss her.
A devoted mother of 4.
She was just the ultimate mom. She always wanted the best for all of us.
Vanishes without a trace.
There was just no explanation for why she would be gone.
I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong.
Investigators are sent down a rabbit hole of suspects.
He said that the subject will never be found.
My mom did not have an enemy in the world other than him.
He disliked Patricia King. He hated Patricia King. He wished harm to come to Patricia King.
And discover grisly clues.
We found Patricia King's dentures.
We did find blood in the back of the truck.
And a money clip that was soaked in blood.
Until a shocking revelation.
She told investigators she knew where Patricia King was.
Changes everything.
We were shocked. That's one of the most evil things you can do.
Horton, Kansas, a tiny farm town deep in America's heartland.
Horton's a town of several hundred people. It's kind of a quiet town. Overall, there's not a lot of crime.
Horton is a rural area surrounded by cornfields. Everybody knows everybody. It's just a typical Midwest small town.
One fall day in 2009 turns into a nightmare when a daughter and son learn their mother, Pat Kimmy, has gone missing.
That Saturday, I got a phone call from my mom's best friend. And when I answered it, she said that she was concerned about my mom because they were supposed to go on a shopping trip that day, and my mom had actually never answered her calls. I knew that was very strange. I jumped in my truck and went out there to my mom's house. Her jacket was in the kitchen. Her purse was sitting there, and her phone. Everything was there but her. Very quickly after, my brother Tony arrived and said, "You need to call the sheriff. This is not right."
Mom, she did not go anywhere without her cell phone. It was in her pocket 24/7. So that was an immediate flag right there that something was wrong.
I can't explain the fear over that because there was just no explanation for why she would be gone.
Alarmed, Rita and Tony call 911. A sergeant arrives at the house at 9:45 a.m. He immediately notices troubling signs.
On the front porch, there was a wooden gate that went across this staircase, and this gate had been broken in half and had been pushed off the porch. I noticed that the door was standing open, but the deadbolt lock was out. A rug in the front door foyer was messed up as well, and it appeared to me that maybe there was some type of struggle. I immediately treated it as a crime scene.
Investigators head to the scene in search of clues as to what could have happened to Pat Kimmy.
The house was well arranged. There was no sign of really anything inside the house that had been disturbed.
There was a computer that had been left on.
The investigators were able to tell from looking at the computer the time of the last keystroke.
It was like 7:01 the night before was the last stroke on the computer. So we believe she was on the computer when maybe there was a knock on the door.
Detectives look for clues outside the home.
We found Patricia Kimmy's car and car keys were at the home. Obviously, she did not leave with her own vehicle, so she must have left with somebody else.
We also had discovered several droplets of blood on the gravel rock portion of the driveway.
After we looked at all the stuff, the door and the broken gate, the blood in the driveway, our thought process was, she's been kidnapped.
At that point, we still were considering a missing person. Maybe she was taken by force.
Police break the hard news to the family that they believe Pat has been kidnapped or possibly even a victim of foul play.
We had hope we're going to find her. But when they found the blood, it was just, your heart sank.
Who took her out of her home and what did they want with her?
And I just leaned over and said, "Rita, do you think she's coming back?" And Rita got tears in her eyes and said, "No, I don't believe she is."
Born in Kansas in 1951, Pat's youth was full of joy.
She was a very big farm girl at heart.
She grew up on a farm. She loved animals and always wanted to be a veterinarian.
In her late teens, Pat fell in love.
My mom met my father, 𝐔𝐬℩ 𝐞𝐿, in high school, so they started dating. Nobody loved him like she did.
In 1971, Pat and Eugene got married. Eugene ran the Kimmy sawmill he had inherited, while Pat was a devoted stay-at-home mom to their 4 kids.
There wasn't anything that meant more to her than her family. She was just the ultimate mom. She always wanted the best for all of us.
As the years passed, cracks started to appear in Pat and Eugene's marriage, and the relationship crumbled.
Eugene was very controlling. To him, she couldn't do anything right. He didn't want her going anywhere, wanted her to stay at home.
In 2008, the couple called it quits.
Following the divorce, I could see a difference in my mom.
And I think there was a sigh of relief to her that she could finally live life freely instead of being under the thumb of Eugene.
Now, all that is left is a trail of blood and a list of unanswered questions. As news of her disappearance spreads, the community unites in their search for Pat.
We got as many people together as possible. We lined up and we started walking, looking for any signs of Pat.
Pat was very well loved in the community.
It was obvious from the support that the community gave us.
Hundreds of people came out, 50 feet apart, spread, walking through the fields. It gave you chills to see something like that.
While the search continues, detectives ask Pat's kids if there was anyone who might have wanted to hurt their mom.
Rita and I both looked at each other and then looked back at him, and I said, 𝐔𝐬𝐞𝐿 is the only one we know of.
My mom did not have an enemy in the world other than him.
As investigators learn more about Eugene, a disturbing picture begins to emerge.
He was often drunk. A lot of times he was very argumentative, and his drinking was never under control.
The descriptions I received from everyone was that he drank too much, that he was just a very unpleasant person.
My mom found out that Eugene had cheated on her, and that was something that truly broke her heart.
All of us told her, get out. Nobody should have to put up with that. So that's when she decided enough was enough.
Pat divorced Eugene a year before she went missing.
Mrs. 𝐔𝐬𝐿 ended up getting the property from the divorce.
Pat had won a very large settlement with the alimony payments being made.
There was a huge payment going out every month to the sum of about $2,300. So he was bitter about that.
Eugene said it was unfair, was constantly complaining to everyone the amount of money he had to give her, and Eugene didn't think she was entitled to anything.
Detectives also learned Eugene had made sinister remarks about his ex-wife.
People in the community told us that he had made comments about how he wished she was dead.
He was constantly saying that he wanted her gone.
He had actually been telling people that he would like my mom to just disappear.
Was Eugene so enraged at the divorce that he followed through on his threats?
I don't think there was much question in anybody's mind of who had a motive to harm Patricia 𝐔𝐬𝐿.
Coming up, investigators uncover a web of alarming secrets and lies.
You could tell that the woman was filled with guilt.
He lied in every interview. Why did he do this if he wasn't involved in this case?
His story, it changed every time.
While family descend into despair.
We were all very fearful at that point.
I knew it was not going to turn out good.
Before the truth blindsides everyone.
She was fighting for her life, kicking on that ground.
You really couldn't make up a case like this.
It's been 24 hours since Pat 𝐔𝐬𝐿 has mysteriously disappeared from her home in Horton, Kansas, and the signs point to foul play. Police already have their first suspect, Pat's ex-husband, Eugene 𝐔𝐬𝐿.
He was upset about the divorce settlement, and he made it very clear that he disliked Patricia 𝐔𝐬𝐿. He hated Patricia 𝐔𝐬𝐿. He wished harm to come to Patricia 𝐔𝐬𝐿. And he would tell that to anybody that would listen to him.
Had Eugene finally made good on his threats? Detectives question him at the 𝐤𝐞𝐜 sawmill.
Eugene 𝐤𝐞𝐜 denied that he was involved with Patricia's disappearance.
He said, yes, I'm upset after the divorce, but he says, I would never harm her.
Evidence at the crime scene indicates Pat was abducted around 7 p.m. So investigators ask Eugene where he was during that time.
He said he went to sell logs that day. He came home, he ate supper alone, and then later on, he turned a movie on TV and watched it until he fell asleep. And so he really had no one that was with him at any time during that period that could vouch for him.
Unable to rule Eugene out, police obtain a warrant and search his home and sawmill, but find no evidence to tie him to Pat's disappearance.
We had nothing concrete to put him anywhere near the scene. There was no evidence of anything to put Eugene at Miss 𝐤𝐜𝐜's house that night.
Eugene 𝐤𝐜𝐜 is put on the back burner. As the search for Pat continues, a telling discovery is made about a quarter mile from her house.
One of our deputies located a camouflage baseball cap.
It was just out among the weeds, and it seemed out of place.
It had a writing on the front that said Sailor's Insurance Company. I instructed him to photograph it and collect it as evidence.
Knowing there had been heavy winds in the area overnight, investigators expand their search and find more evidence just a half-mile west.
They find a money clip that had some U.S. currency attached to it, and that currency was soaked in blood.
We found a bag containing some rifle shells that had blood on it. There was coins on the roadway that had blood on them. All these items was collected and sent for DNA testing. And then just to the east of that, there was an area in the grass that kind of been pushed down.
They noticed that the grass was matted down in an area about the size of a person, which led them to believe that a person had been on the ground in that location. And then as they examined that closer, they began to find blood drops. That was when they knew we have a second crime scene.
Because of the blood on the money clip, the blood on the coins, the activity in the grass that had blood on it, we knew something significant happened at that scene.
I and Larry both thought, this is not good. We were hoping to find her, but I just knew this is not going to have a good resolution.
Police unearth one more chilling piece of evidence down the road.
Law enforcement called me telling me, we just found Patricia 𝐤𝐜𝐜's dentures. And I was asking them, well, how in the world do you know they're Patricia 𝐤𝐜𝐜's dentures? And they said, because her name is printed on the inside of them. And it clearly was her dentures. I don't think anybody doubted that there had been foul play.
When we found the dentures with her name on them, we all thought that, yeah, this is probably a homicide now.
The grisly discovery forces Pat's family to face a grim reality.
We knew that she had been there and that something really awful had happened to her.
My heart just sunk because then I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong.
While the roadside evidence leads back to Pat, nothing points to a killer until an officer sees something close by.
There was a receipt found. The receipt had a date and time stamp on it.
It was dated November the 6th, the night of Patricia's disappearance. It was from a Walmart store in Hiawatha. We was able to go up and track down who the person was that done this transaction.
Police bring the customer, a local teen, down to the station.
We asked him what he was doing in the area, and he said he went out there with his girlfriend. They were sitting there under the stars, had a cooler, left the area, forgot to put the cooler in the vehicle.
and he had returned to that location to retrieve his cooler. He was able to then describe seeing a very unique vehicle in the area that was stopped along the side of the road in the vicinity of Mrs. Kimmy's home. And that vehicle was unique because it was a red pickup truck that had dual wheels on the back.
What the teen tells police next leaves them stunned.
He also described that as he drove past that truck on the side of the road, he could see what he believed was a pair of legs in the deep grass, and that those legs were possibly kicking, as if someone was laying on their back in the grass and kicking their legs.
We all thought that, yeah, someone was fighting for their life, and as close as it was to Mrs. Kimmy's house, we immediately thought, well, that was probably Pat on the ground.
It was a good break, and it was something that we knew we were going to have to start focusing on and find out who was capable of kidnapping and murdering Patricia Kimmey.
Investigators working the no-body homicide of mother of four, Pat Kimmey, have found a witness who might have seen a roadside attack the night Pat disappeared.
He was out with a girlfriend, and on the north side of the roadway, about where the items were found that had the blood on them, he saw a red dually pickup.
He said that there was someone on the ground kicking. He didn't really see anything other than that, and he left the area. I think at that point he was young. He was scared of what was going on, and really, I don't think he knew exactly what to do at the time.
There was no reason for him to be making that story up and put himself at that location when he didn't need to. So his story was pretty believable.
The gal that he was with, we talked to her.
He had accounts for everything that he had done that evening. His girlfriend backed up what he said, so we had no reason to believe him of being a suspect.
If that truly was Pat Kimmey in the grass, detectives know it's imperative to identify the driver of the red dually truck.
To have a description of a red dually pickup was really a strong lead.
A dually pickup truck is a pickup with dual tires on the back of it.
My first thought was, we've got a potential suspect vehicle that we need to start looking for.
As police search ownership records for red dually trucks, they received the forensics report from the crime scene.
The DNA on the sailor insurance hat was found to be that of a male.
Investigators were able to obtain DNA off of the sweatband on the inside of that sailor ball cap. But you can't just take DNA and say, whose is this? You need a comparison.
No match is found in the criminal database for the ball cap DNA, but other evidence is more conclusive.
The money clip, the coins, the blood on everything found at the second crime scene, all was that of a profile that matched a female.
And so we were able to get the DNA and be able to positively identify that blood as belonging to Patricia Kimmey.
While the results are encouraging, detectives still don't have a body or a primary suspect. Then, a week after Pat vanished, her daughter Rita remembers something.
I was just thinking about my mom and pulled up her picture to look at on the computer. And there was a memory I had of her talking about a man who had worked on her house. His name was Dane.
Mom had a contractor at her house, Dane DeWeese, and she had some work, and she had to call him back a couple times because she wasn't satisfied with it.
Pat had had a contractor from Abilene, Kansas come up and do some work on her fireplace. And she had some disagreements with the contractor that something wasn't correct.
So I got to thinking about that, and pulled him up on the computer, and he had a police record. So that was very concerning. Just thinking about the fact that he had been around her, he had access to her home.
And what really raised a flag with him is when we found out he drove a red pickup. Well, we're on to something now.
Could Pat and Dane have gotten into an argument about his work, causing him to violently lash out at her? Rita alerts police about Dane, and they immediately bring him in for an interview.
He was very cooperative, told us that yes, he has a red dually pickup.
He told us that he had done some work for Patricia King house. He was honest in telling us that she was not happy with some of the work. He volunteered to come back and fix those items, which he did, and had thought he had settled everything with her.
He thought Pat was a very good person to work for. He said he got it corrected, and Pat was very appreciative that he got it corrected, and he said that he thought that everything was okay between him and Pat and that he would never harm Pat.
Mr. DeWeese did not really have an alibi. He had nothing to back up his whereabouts for the night before. He told the investigators he was at home alone, but he didn't have anybody that could vouch for that. And he quickly became our prime suspect.
He allowed us to search the truck, which we did.
When investigators search Dane's truck, they make a disturbing discovery.
We did find blood in the back of the truck.
We were a little alarmed when we saw the blood in the back of Mr. DeWeese's truck.
Could it be Pat Kimmy's blood? And could this be the evidence that blows the case wide open?
This looked like a very serious matter and indicated that he perhaps was the person involved. And the blood in the back of the truck really made it suspicious.
It's been a week since Pat Kimmey was abducted and likely killed. Police suspect contractor Dane DeWeese is involved and have found incriminating evidence in his vehicle.
In the pickup, we did find blood in the back of the truck.
Mr. DeWeese volunteered that he had recently been hunting for deer, and there might have been some blood and fur left in the back of the bed.
We took samples from the truck of the blood to confirm his story.
Detectives rushed the samples for DNA analysis.
They were able to determine the blood actually was from a deer, and it was not human blood.
After that, we searched down everything we could for DeWeese and never could find out any information that he was even in the area of Pat Kimmey. So we had to eliminate him. It was hard to take at the time.
We really thought we were onto something with the dually pickup, but there wasn't enough to go forward with.
It was very disappointing. Right back to square one we go.
With no new suspects, investigators focus on finding the owner of the red truck and the Sailor insurance hat found on the side of the road.
We talked to the Sailor Insurance Company to get a list of people that would potentially have access to a Sailor hat.
Investigators were able to get a customer list and find a list of possibilities of a red dually pickup insured by Sailor Insurance.
Detectives asked Pat's family if they recognize anyone on the list.
They had us go down through the list, and Roger Hollister's name stuck out. He's bought lumber at the sawmill before.
They said Roger Hollister had done business with Eugene Kimmey and that Roger Hollister drove a red dually pickup.
Roger Hollister was reported to be somewhat of a hothead, kind of a person who got upset a lot, kind of a person who could be violent.
He was not well liked, not a nice guy, and it was a major red flag for us.
Believing Roger could be a major suspect, Detectives rushed to the Hollister farm to interview him.
We were able to contact Mr. Hollister at his house. He was wearing a neck brace. He was walking with a cane.
We thought, he's a frail old man. There's no way he could be involved in this.
Roger Hollister told investigators that he knew Eugene Kimmey. He'd taken logs over to be processed at the sawmill.
But he had never been to Pat's house. He didn't know Pat.
He denied any knowledge at all of the disappearance of Patricia Kimmey.
Detectives asked Roger about the ball cap and the dually truck.
Roger was very cooperative. He said that he did have a sailor insurance cat, but it got tore up by his dog. And he said, yes, I had a red dually pickup, but he told us he sold that truck to a guy by the name of Rick for $2,000 before Pat disappeared.
Investigators asked Roger to account for his movements the night Pat was abducted.
He said that he'd been at his home the whole night. His wife left late evening hours and drove to Kansas City to be with her daughter, and he was home alone the whole time.
Even though Roger had owned both a sailor insurance hat and a dually truck, detectives don't believe he's their guy.
We did have some doubt that Mr. Hollister could have been the person that done this because he had a neck brace on. He could barely walk.
And they said he appears to be so physically challenged, we don't think that he would really even be capable of dragging someone out of their home and hurting them.
At that point, we didn't think that Mr. Hollister could have been involved in this case.
Detectives dismiss Roger Hollister as a suspect. A month has passed since anyone last saw Pat alive, and investigators are no closer to locating her killer or her body.
There was a lot of pressure to find Patricia Kimmey. The investigative team wanted to find her, the family wanted to find her, the whole community wanted to find her, and get justice for Patricia Kimmey.
It was getting frustrating, thinking that we might never find her, never get this case solved.
2 months into the case, police catch a break when Pat's son Tony and nephew DJ show up to the police station with shocking new information.
They told us that Roger Hollister went over to the Kimmey sawmill and he wants to talk to Eugene, but Eugene wasn't there. The employee at the sawmill, DJ Kimmey, told the investigators that Roger said to him, "Tell Eugene I'm here to collect. I want my money."
And DJ says, "I don't have your money. I don't know what you're talking about."
And Roger then said he had taken care of it in reference to my mom.
And he said, well, I'm just here to recoup my money, that I took care of the subject. And he also stated that the subject will never be found.
It was a major break in the case. We were on to something now.
Police are investigating the disappearance and homicide of 58-year-old Pat Kimmey. Now, 2 months into the case, they've learned from Pat's family that Roger Hollister has come looking for money, claiming he got rid of Pat.
When Roger said the subject will never be found, referring to my mom like that, we were all very fearful at that point.
Pat's nephew DJ tells police he remembers he saw Eugene and Roger talking at the Kimmey sawmill one day.
We believe that maybe Eugene was drinking, did not like the situation he was in with his wife, and maybe he made a comment to Roger, said he wanted to do away with his wife. As we confirmed, there was numerous comments made to numerous people to that effect.
He didn't like the divorce settlement, lost land, he was making alimony payments. That's a strong motive for murder. So our thought process was maybe he was drunk, and maybe Eugene told Roger, I'd pay somebody to get rid of my wife.
Despite having previously ruled Eugene out, police circle back and check his finances for any evidence of a payout.
Law enforcement went through Eugene's bank records, and there was no activity on his checking account.
We saw no indication that money was actually paid out. We executed a search warrant on the sawmill of 𝐔𝐧𝐞𝐞𝐿, but we really didn't find anything that would substantiate Eugene's involvement in the case.
Undeterred, detectives focus on tracking down the red dually truck Roger had once owned.
Initially told us that he sold that truck to a guy by the name of Rick for $2,000. We searched a VIN number for a pickup belonging to Roger Hollister, but it was not put in the name of anybody by the name of Rick. And we found out that the truck was actually sold to a dealership in Tecumseh, Nebraska.
Investigators learned that Roger bought the truck back from the dealership 12 days after Pat went missing.
He lied about his truck being sold. Why did he do this if he wasn't involved in this case?
When police bring Roger to the station for another interview, they cannot believe their eyes.
He was not the same person as he had been. The first interview with Roger, he wore the neck brace, he walked with a cane. But now he comes through that door like there was nothing wrong with him whatsoever. We were very shocked. I don't think anything at all was wrong with Roger Hollister. I think he just was using that as a front for everything that was going on.
Anytime a suspect is untruthful with you, that just makes them look all the more suspicious.
Roger tells police he went to the sawmill to buy lumber and denies speaking to Eugene or DJ about Pat or any money. But when pressed about the truck, his story changes.
Roger said that he'd sold it to a group of Mexicans that were passing through the area. He did not know their names or anything about them. That sounded fabricated.
His story, it changed every time.
With suspicion growing, detectives ask Roger for a DNA sample. When the results come back, the news is conclusive.
We found out that the DNA on the Sailor insurance hat belongs to Roger Hollister.
That was a very big moment, because now we know that he was at that crime scene. Because his DNA is found there, we knew he was involved.
Detectives now have enough probable cause to serve a search warrant on Roger's farm.
We took a track hoe out there, and we was able to pick things up, dig around.
And what was found was parts of the truck. A lot of the stuff had been buried, and it's been burnt pretty severely. And of course, we couldn't get DNA because of the fire.
And the VIN number matched Roger Hollister's truck. It was then obvious that Roger Hollister had destroyed that truck and was attempting to conceal it.
At that point, we had what we thought was a very good circumstantial case against Roger Hollister. We searched the property, but we still didn't have a body of Patricia 𝐤𝐿. Our prosecutor kept saying, we need a body.
Then, a few weeks after finding the truck, investigators get some alarming news.
I received a phone call from investigators who said, "You're never going to believe this. Roger Hollister and Rebecca Hollister were just involved in a vehicle accident." The investigators said that the vehicle had turned in front of a semi-tanker and hit head-on.
Rebecca was seriously injured to the point that she had to have surgery. Roger, who was the driver of the vehicle, didn't sustain any real serious injuries.
And if the truck driver hadn't paid attention, there's probably a good chance they would have both been killed.
Detectives rush to the hospital to speak with the Hollisters. And Roger's wife, Rebecca, tells them she believes her husband was trying to kill them both.
Why is he trying to commit suicide? Why is he trying to kill Rebecca in the car?
I think that the walls were closing in, and Roger knew it. Roger knew we were closing in on him.
There was an arrest warrant issued for Roger Hollister for attempted murder on Rebecca. and he was charged for that.
Now in custody, Roger says he wants to tell police what really happened to Pat Kimmy.
He said that he was with Eugene when the kidnapping occurred.
He said, yes, his truck was used in the crime, but Eugene forced him to go.
He said that he just drove Eugene Kimmy and that Eugene Kimmy killed Patricia.
And so is Eugene still involved somehow? We don't know for sure.
Detectives bring Eugene in for another interview.
He admitted that he did not like the situation he was in with his wife, but he says, I would never harm her or kill her.
Eugene says, oh yeah, I may have mentioned that I would like to see her dead, but I didn't offer money to Roger to kill her.
Eugene Kimmy did not deny that he'd made those remarks, but that he had said it more in anger, you know, just a person running their mouth that's upset with their ex-spouse.
Detectives have no solid proof Eugene was with Roger that night, or that any money ever changed hands.
As a result, we were never able to tie Eugene Kimmy into the murder, never had sufficient evidence to charge Eugene Kimmy.
Police release Eugene. Then, 6 months after Pat's disappearance, Rebecca Hollister asked to meet investigators.
She was very upset. You could tell that the woman was filled with guilt. She told investigators that she knew where Patricia Kimmy was, and she wanted to take them to the body.
It's been 6 months since police believe Pat Kimmy was abducted and murdered. Now their prime suspect's wife, Rebecca Hollister, is at the station and wanting to talk.
She told investigators that she knew where the body was, and she told them that the body was at their farm.
We were shocked. I think she was realizing that she better come clean, and I think she decided to do the right thing by giving us the body.
Rebecca Hollister was offered immunity if she would cooperate with us and be truthful. We would grant her immunity from prosecution.
Rebecca claims her husband, Roger, told her where he buried Pat Kimmy on their 40-acre farm.
She took us to the property, and she says, I think she's down there, and points towards a ditch. And sure enough, exposed to everybody was about a 6 to 7 inch section of spine.
We found a piece of the vertebrae with some ribs attached, and we found another short piece of the ribs.
The body was burnt, the body was cut up, the body was crushed.
I mean, he destroyed her body. And lucky enough, we found enough of the remains to identify her that we knew we had Patricia Kimmy.
One of the officers told me that her body had been dismembered and burned, and that was very hard, one of the hardest days.
When we recovered the body, I felt we had a very strong case. I felt we had the right man. I felt we had the evidence to convict him.
On June 4th, 2010, Roger Hollister is charged with first-degree murder. At the trial, prosecutors present a picture of what they believe happened to Pat the night she was murdered.
Roger went to her house, got her to open that door, and when she did, Roger pushed through, was able to grab Patricia, subdue her, and take her out to that truck. He got her into that truck and took off down her driveway. As he turned the corner onto the gravel road, she somehow got away from him. She jumped out of that truck, and he pursued her into that ditch.
There was a confrontation. I think she put up one heck of a fight, and she was fighting for her life when she was killed, kicking on that ground.
We believe that Patricia Kimmy died on the side of that road where the evidence is found. and that he then got her into that truck, returned back to his farm, and tried to burn the body, and then chopped up what was left and buried it there on the side of the creek. And then he went and tried to get his money. We were never able to recover any financial records indicating any money changing hands. But yet we knew that had to be the motive because Roger Hollister had no other reason to kill Patricia Kimmy other than hoping to being paid by Eugene Kimmy. We believed that maybe Eugene was mouthing off about paying to kill Patricia and that
a cherished family at the center of a small town.
They laughed and they joked around and they were happy together. They were loved and well respected in our community.
Is gunned down in cold blood.
I'll never forget walking in the house that morning and seeing what I saw. Who could have done this? Was it somebody that they knew? Maybe this person had sought some type of revenge.
Detectives pursue a trail of suspects.
He was actually set to gain from the death.
And then his behavior was alarming.
During the polygraph, he started tearing the stuff off. I know they had had issues within their relationship.
They said, well, I can take care of that problem for the right sum of money.
But the killer remains elusive.
What are we missing? What are we not doing?
Until a shocking confession reveals the true culprit.
Then she agreed to wear a recording device and elicit some more information. I mean, it was just incredible. It was disturbing.
The killer was about the most unexpected thing. It was such a shock.
Columbia, Kentucky is a small but tight-knit rural community.
Everyone knows everyone else. Your neighbors feel like family. People watch out for one another.
Not uncommon. You'd be walking downtown, you'll stop, run into friends or family. Very friendly atmosphere.
One of the most beloved families in Columbia are the Wellnitzes. They own a veterinary clinic just steps away from their home.
I just remember that environment at the clinic was a place that I, as a kid, wanted to spend every spare moment that I had just because it was a great place to be. Joe and Beth, their kids, Dennis and Meg, they were kind, they were loving, and they were fun to be around.
On February 26, 1993, the town forever changes after two of Joe and Beth's employees make a grim discovery just after 8 a.m. at the Wellnitz home.
Two employees had shown up for work, but Joe and Beth were not at the clinic. The clinic was adjacent to the residence. So the gentleman walked over to the house, went in the back door, and discovered Joe's body in the downstairs area of the home. The lady that had also shown up for work that morning, she then went to the house, discovered two bodies upstairs.
Joe and Beth and their son, Dennis, they've been shot. Then she ran out and called the police.
Investigators rushed to the scene.
I'll never forget walking in the house that morning and seeing what I saw. It was just total shock. I knew what kind of people they were. I knew how kind they were and how compassionate they were with their work that they did. I couldn't believe it. When we entered the house, there was Joe laying there on the floor. He was on his stomach. His hand was underneath his chest.
He had a pair of gray sweatpants on and a white t-shirt. It looked like he came out of a bathroom and had been shot and fell face first. Blood that had pooled around the body.
My initial reaction was shock. But then I realized shortly thereafter that I had a job to do, and my job was to take care of the scene, to see if we could find out who did this horrible thing. Around the scene where Joe was found, there was multiple shell casings, and you could see bullet holes in the walls. We went from there to the upstairs, and we found Dennis's body laying there in his bedroom. He had no shirt on. You could see bullet holes in his back. There was also shell casings laying around.
Looked like he was crawling on the floor and was executed by the killer at that point. Entering into the back bedroom that belonged to Joe and Beth, you could see multiple shell casings back there.
Beth was found on the side of the bed nearest to the doorway. She appeared to have been standing when she was shot, with multiple gunshot wounds to her head and upper torso. The Wellnitses were all found either in or near a bed or in clothes that suggested they had been sleeping. So it was apparent that it had happened during the night at some point or early morning hours.
After examining the bodies, police scour the rest of the house for clues, but there's no sign of a murder weapon.
There were no broken windows, there was no furniture turned over, the house had not been ransacked. It was significant that there was no forced entry, that at least gave the impression that it was somebody with some degree of familiarity with the home and with the Wellnitz family. It appeared this family had been targeted.
Who could have done this? You know, who is the person that would have done such a horrible crime in this community that is usually so gentle? Was it somebody that they knew? Maybe this person had sought some type of revenge. Once we saw that these three people had been murdered, we immediately wanted to know, where is Meg Wellnitz at, so we can find her to make sure she's safe, first of all, make sure she's not a victim. We were able to locate her. She was at school in Lexington and was unharmed.
Officers are tasked with breaking the news to Joe and Beth's daughter.
Meg was told that her mom and dad and brother were murdered, were dead. I really felt sorry for her. I thought, now how is she going to go on? You know, how does she recover from this?
We got a phone call just a little while after I got up, and they said, Beth and Joe have been killed. And at that moment, we didn't know Dennis also had been killed. And I just stayed in my room that day and just cried. Just couldn't believe that they were gone. They were like a second set of parents for me.
One of my family members had called. They gave me the horrible news that Joe and Beth and Dennis had all been murdered. And that's a day you don't forget.
Joe Wellnitz was born in 1942 and grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. From a young age, he always loved animals and turned that passion into a career.
Not many rural communities anywhere would have been able to boast of having a veterinarian with the background that Joe had. Joe was one of the most caring, kindest gentlemen that you will ever meet.
In his 30s, Joe met Beth Preston, a woman 10 years his junior. Both divorced, they married in 1979, and Joe adopted her 2 kids, Dennis and Meg. 2 years later, they moved their family and Joe's clinic from Lexington to Columbia.
Meg would come in and out of the clinic. Dennis would mostly, I would just see him outside. He was only 20 years old.
Dennis was popular in school. He had worked in town. He had attended college. He was just a well-liked young man.
Beth was the one I was closest to. She was the face of the clinic. She was the person everyone saw when they walked in the door. Always had a smile on her face. The relationship between Joe and Beth was perfect to me. They laughed and they joked around and they were happy together. They were a very happy family.
But one horrific night has changed everything. Who could have wanted to kill the Wellnitzes, and why?
The 2 employees that discovered the bodies were certainly interviewed that morning. There was really no motive, and the way the 2 of them arrived that morning, there was really no opportunity for either of them to commit the murders. They were dismissed as suspects.
In Lexington, police ask Meg to help them piece together her family's last movements. She says she visited them for dinner 2 days ago, but had returned that night as she had school.
Meg told the police that she'd been in Lexington the night before the bodies were found, and that she'd been playing cards with some friends, her boyfriend, as well as another couple, Bill Meese. and then Bill Meese's wife.
When asked if Meg was aware of any problems at home, she gives police their first lead.
There was a couple that were tenants of Joe and Bess they may have had issues with, and their names Brenda and Dave Cowell.
The Cowells had been living in a cabin on the Wellnitz property.
They were living there rent-free, exchanged for doing some work for Joe and Beth. There was some discrepancy there about whether they were doing the work sufficiently or not. Joe and Beth felt like they weren't, so they gave them a bill for $1,800 for the rent. And ultimately, they never paid it. They filed bankruptcy.
Were the Cowells angry enough to want the Wellnitzes dead? Was this murder payback?
They were persons of interest, people that we needed to talk to. We needed to prove or disprove whether they were involved in it or not.
Coming up, fear races through the community.
We thought if this could happen to the Wellnitzes, it could happen to any of us. Who would be next? People were scared. Everybody wanted to know who did it, why they did it, and how they did it.
Everybody was just guessing, gossiping.
And police unearthed family secrets, indicating a potential motive.
It was a surprise to me to learn that there was another child involved. There was actually a will giving him so much money out of the estate.
Before a shocking confession,
I walked through the house, I engaged in firearm. I emptied the magazine of weapons.
Reveals a killer no one could have imagined.
It was a bombshell. Couldn't believe it.
Police investigating the homicide of Joe, Beth, and Dennis Wellnitz have their first suspects, tenants who had recently clashed with the family over money.
When we learned about the bankruptcy, about them living on the property, this discrepancy about the work they were doing, whether it was sufficient or not, especially when it came to the money, and then this bill for $1,800, we thought, well, this could be a motive for them wanting to do something. We knew that we had to talk to them. We had to see if they were involved.
Police learned the Cowells no longer live on the Wellnitz property.
Maybe they left there disgruntled. We went on that theory. Maybe they had went to the Wellnitz house that morning and then got into it with them, and then that's when all this escalated from there.
While detectives tracked down the Cowells, officers canvassed the area for witnesses.
We did a neighborhood canvass to talk to people to see if anybody in that area had heard anything, seen anything, or had any other information that they could provide. We were not able to identify anybody that did hear anything that went on that night during the shooting or anything.
4 days after the murder, detectives locate the Cowells and bring them in for separate interviews. Brenda claims she didn't hold any grudge against the Wellnitzes.
She told us that even though they had not paid the money that Joe and Beth felt like they owed, they had worked out the discrepancy and everything had moved on from that.
Police asked Brenda where she was the night of the murder.
They ended up moving off the farm. She said she was not there. She was at home when it happened.
When detectives speak with Brenda's husband, Dave, he's unable to confirm her alibi because of his own.
Dave was working in Louisville, Kentucky, which is almost in Indiana, probably 100 miles from where this happened at. He adamantly denied any involvement in this. He didn't want it to do harm to them.
Investigators speak to friends of the Wellnitzes to confirm the dispute with the Cowells had been resolved.
We were talking to friends in that area. We were able to determine that situation where those hard feelings had been resolved a long time prior to this happening. They were ruled out as far as having anything to do with this murder.
With no arrests made, fear begins to grip the town.
We thought if this could happen to the Wellnitzes, it could happen to any of us. It could happen to anyone. They were loved and well respected in our community, and so if they could be killed, who would be next? People were scared. Everybody wanted to know who did it, why they did it, and how they did it.
Word travels fast. Everybody was expressing their opinion as to what may or may not have contributed to this. But everybody was just guessing, gossiping.
It's got the whole community in an uproar about what happened. We had to get some answers pretty quickly, make sure that it wasn't some random killing and that other people may be coming next. When we started thinking about who could have done this, we started thinking about the veterinarian business. People get very sensitive about their pets, so we thought, well, maybe somebody had gotten disgruntled over that. We learned from the employees there that there was an issue between Jerry Yarberry and the Wellnesses, where he had brought in his dog to have treatment done to its eye, and the dog ultimately was blind. So we thought, well, maybe this might be a motive for somebody to do harm to them. Some of the key questions that we wanted to know from Jerry was, how did he feel now toward the Wellnesses, and how did he feel toward what had happened between them?
Police bring Jerry into the station for questioning.
He told us that he was very upset about his pet. He refused to pay the bill that was owed to the Wellnesses. They ended up having to file a lawsuit against him in order to recoup the funds.
While Jerry admits he was angry with Joe, he says he isn't a killer.
He adamantly denied doing anything to the Wellnesses as far as going to that extreme. When we talked to Jerry, we learned that he was home watching TV with his wife and kids, and we were able to confirm that that's where he was at, and therefore we were able to eliminate him as a suspect in this case.
There's frustration on the part of the police because they want to see a crime solved. They want to see a murderer, in this case, held accountable. They want to see that person punished. And then there's frustration because we don't know if justice is ever going to be served.
As the case threatens to stall, a friend of the Wellnitz family contacts police with pertinent information.
I said, I'm a real estate broker, and our getting the property ready to sell, there was an indenture, kind of a rectangle, in the floor of that master bedroom closet. I knew for a fact Joe and them kept a floor safe upstairs in their bedroom in the closet. I'm assuming, but that's where he kept all these important papers, his deed, anything that was of significance.
Gives you the opinion that the safe was part of the plan all along, that the killer knew where that safe was at. It was not setting out in the open where you would commit these 3 murders and then say, oh, okay, there's a safe, I'm gonna take that with me. It was hidden back in a closet.
It certainly caused the officers to focus their attention on who would want that safe, who would know the safe was there, and who would stand to have some benefit from removing the safe, especially in light of the fact that nothing else was taken, nothing else was disturbed.
If we could locate that safe, and very easily, that's going to put us on the trail of whoever committed this crime.
Police investigating the first triple homicide in Columbia, Kentucky, are searching for an object stolen from the scene they hope will lead them to the killer.
The missing fire safe was certainly a critical piece of evidence that the officers were investigating. They tried to determine more specifically what the contents of the safe were, what was in there, what was going to perhaps turn up that might then be a clue.
In talking to the family, we were able to learn that there was possibly could be insurance papers in that safe, maybe even up to around $1,000.
In this case, the only motive was to either cause the death of the Wellnitz family or to take the safe out.
As detectives put out an APB for the safe, the autopsy results come in.
One of the crucial things that we need to know is the time of death.
As far as the time frame of the death, the internal examination of the bodies was consistent that they had been killed within a few hours prior to the bodies being discovered.
It's estimated Joe, Beth, and Dennis were murdered around 4 a.m.
The medical examiner was able to determine that each victim died as a result of multiple gunshot wounds.
None of the victims had defense marks on their bodies, meaning they had likely been taken by surprise.
Additional projectiles were recovered from the bodies during the autopsy. The firearms examiner did determine that all of the shots were fired from a 9mm handgun. It did seem likely that they were all fired by the same person, given the fact that they were all fired from the same gun.
Obviously, from there, we're going to start doing multiple interviews to try to eliminate or show who has killed these three people, who could have that much of a grudge against them. During our investigation, we were able to learn that Joe had another son by the name of Eric. From my previous personal experience with Joe and Beth, I didn't know about Eric until after the murder. Joe had adopted him much the way that he did with Meg and Dennis, and then that marriage broke apart. It was a surprise to me to learn that there was another child involved that Joe had adopted at a young age. We started receiving information, documentation showing that Eric was actually still set to gain from the death of Joe. There was actually a will giving him so much money out of the estate to the tune of $250,000. Eric was somebody that we needed to talk to because that much money obviously would be a motive for somebody to do something like this.
Police tracked the 19-year-old down at his home in Lexington.
When Eric was interviewed, he was shocked that it occurred. They had issues within their relationship, him and Joe. It was a very distant relationship and then non-existent after a while. Eric also indicated that he felt like he was replaced by Dennis. They had completely become estranged after so long and had stopped any contact with each other. One of the things that we learned was that Eric did resent Joe. Part of that resentment was because of this estrangement.
Had Eric settled a score and inherited a fortune by killing the family? When police question him about the will, they are taken aback by his response.
When he learned that he was a beneficiary to this will, he was actually surprised that he was included in it, because they've been estranged for that many years.
But detectives can't just take Eric at his word.
The motive is there, the possibility, so we needed to know whether he had any type of alibi that we could substantiate to make sure that he wasn't in Columbia that morning. We learned during our interview with Eric Wellness that he had worked that night, and then once he got off work, he went to a friend's house and slept at that friend's house.
Eric says he was in Lexington the entire night, 2 hours away from Columbia.
So we were able to talk to that friend and determine that he did not have the opportunity to commit this crime. We felt pretty certain that he was not a suspect at this point. We eliminated him and moved on.
I was shocked, and it was an odd situation being questioned by the police officers. The fact that I was named in the will, if that was something that I had known, then that for sure gives me a motive. But there's no way in the world I could have ever done anything like that. Yes, I was angry as a child, having your dad disappearing out of your life, kind of in a snap of a finger. It was hard, and I was angry, but not that kind of anger where I wished anything bad.
Detectives learn that Meg, the only other surviving member of the family, is also named in the will. Could she have anything to do with the murder?
I really felt bad for Meg at that time because I knew Meg, but we had to get some answers. When we approached her about the will, she didn't know about it. She also wanted answers, She loved them. Joe and Beth and Dennis.
She was so bright and intelligent and loving.
Police ask Meg about her relationship with her parents. She says it was good, but she raises one concern.
Officers did learn that Beth and Meg had some disagreements over some of the people that she was now spending a lot of time with.
One person in particular, Meg's boyfriend, Randy Appleton.
Beth and Joe didn't want him around, so we needed to talk to Randy. Randy became a viable person of interest.
After 3 members of the Wellnitz family are gunned down in their own home, Police now have a new suspect, the boyfriend of surviving daughter Meg, 20-year-old Randy Appleton.
Joe didn't go into any details, but he had a concern, I think, of the direction that Meg had taken as far as who she was associating with.
That could be a motive for Randy Appleton.
Detectives asked Randy where he was the night of the murder.
He was leery about talking to us.
Randy tells police he was playing cards with Meg and her friends until 2 a.m. the night of the murder. Then he mentions something that grabs detectives' attention.
We learned that he was interested in firearms. We had learned that he had frequented a firing range.
If the murder weapon had been used at the same firing range where he in fact acknowledged having been practicing with a 9mm, would be a very critical part of the investigation if those shell casings collected from the range matched the murder weapon that was believed to have been used to kill the Wellens family.
We're starting to see red flags at this point. Randy was one that liked guns. He did like to go to that firing range and did use a weapon there. We actually ended up going to the firing range and collecting several spent shell casings. All of them were submitted to the crime lab. Our hope was that we could match those rounds through the laboratory to some of the 9mm shell casings that we had located.
2 weeks later, police received the results on the shell casings.
They were not able to find any casings that matched as having been fired from the murder weapon that was used to kill the Wellens family.
It was very disappointing that we were unable to tie any of those shell casings to Randy Appleton.
It suggested either that they used a different weapon at the firing range than was used to murder the family, or that it could have been somebody else.
Despite the setback, Randy's love of guns and familiarity with the Wellnitz home means he is still a suspect. Police look to confirm his alibi with those he and Meg claim to have been with the night of the murder, Bill and Regina Meese.
We had to talk to them to see if that was what they were doing, playing cards during the early morning hours, because that was Randy's alibi. Bill was cooperative, where Bill had agreed to talk to us about certain things.
Bill corroborates Randy's alibi.
They were all four together playing cards till the early morning hours. He agreed to take a lie detector test. During the process of the polygraph examiner asked him if he knew anything about what happened, if he had any involvement about what happened.
And then his behavior was something that was alarming. It was something that caused some concern with the officers.
He started tearing the stuff off that you put on during a polygraph and just shut it down right then. And then the polygraph was over at that point. So he did not complete the polygraph. He was just very mad. Definitely raised red flags with us that he knows more than he's telling us, and that he's afraid of that polygraph because that polygraph might tell us more than he wants us to know.
Despite his behavior, police have nothing concrete on Bill and are forced to let him go.
We tried to talk to Regina, but Bill did not want us to interview her. He would get very controlling with her. It's over at this point. We were still running down leads. Obviously, you always get leads that you're going to follow. But one of the things that I thought early on was, if we ever get to a point where Regina and Bill are not talking, we need to go back and reapproach her.
Lacking any new developments, months turn into years, leaving detectives and the Wellnitz's loved ones frustrated.
What are we missing? What are we not doing? They're friends of mine, and this was one of those cases that you want to solve before your career is over. It was just like you were at a dead end, and we couldn't figure that out,
When the case went cold, it was very disheartening just knowing that someone had committed this terrible crime and that they may possibly never have to pay for that. I just remember feeling so sad. Beth and Joe were just such a light in our community.
You don't have any answers when it happened. Had no idea of who could have done it or why they would have done it. There was so little information coming out, it just kind of fell to the wayside. It's just sad.
The case remains cold for nearly a decade. But in 2002, detectives decide to take a fresh look at the triple homicide.
This case is still on my mind. I had never forgot it. And I said, okay, what's the condition or what's the status of Bill and Regina? And I learned at that point that they were separated. That was the thing that we were waiting on before, is when this separation occurred, to go see what Regina had to say outside of the control of Bill Meese.
Police track Regina down, and what she has to tell them is shocking.
When we met with Regina in Lexington, she told us that she had proof of who killed the Wellnesses.
Nine years after the murder of Joe and Beth Wellnitz and their son Dennis, police finally have a break in the case. One of their surviving daughter Meg's best friends, Regina Meese, says she knows who the killer is and has proof.
When we approached her, she immediately said, "I've got this piece of evidence." She essentially wanted some assurance that she wouldn't be charged with tampering with evidence. And I assured her that if she in fact turned it over to law enforcement, I didn't think it would even constitute a crime. Now, at that time, we didn't know if she had photographs that perhaps were taken during the commission of the crime. We didn't know if she may have had the firearm that was used in the commission of the crime, or what piece of evidence that she had. But she shared with us that she had in fact retained possession of the fire safe that had been removed from the back closet in the bedroom upstairs of Beth and Joe's home.
When police ask Regina how she got the safe, she says the person who gave it to her is the one who shot the Wellnitzes.
Regina's the one started the ball rolling. Everything started to fall in place. Regina told us that Bill Meese was the one responsible for the death of Dennis and the death of Joe and Beth Wellness. It was very shocking, very shocking.
She had been interviewed by the police before, but had been told by her then husband, now ex-husband, not to talk to the police, not to tell them anything. And it certainly appeared, at least, to be a burden lifted that she was able to share this information.
It was a huge deal when we heard what she had to say. That was the part that we needed to happen, and that from there on, it steamrolled from there.
Regina takes police to her home to see the fire safe.
It was the same type and everything that we were missing from the house that night. It was the same measurements, that same dimensions that we had measured when we were in the Wellness house and discovered that the safe was missing.
When we later compared the bottom impressions on that fire safe to the imprints taken from the closet, it was a perfect match, and in fact it was the fire safe that was stolen from the Wellness home.
Nothing of significant value is found in the safe, but Regina delivers another explosive revelation to police. She tells them that Bill is planning to kill again.
Interviewing Bill Meese's ex-wife, it came to the attention of the police that a mutual friend had had an encounter with Bill Meese where he had offered to kill her boyfriend.
Bill had told her that he would commit this murder for her for $500.
I mean, it was just incredible. It was disturbing.
Was Bill some kind of twisted serial murderer? Police decide to move before he can strike once more.
We initiated this investigation and contacted that lady that Bill had approached.
She agreed to wear a recording device, speak with Bill Meese. He was provided a certain sum of money as a down payment, and the police then arrested him for offering to kill this mutual friend's boyfriend.
With Bill in jail, police question him about the Wellnitz triple homicide.
There was no statements made about the Wellnitz murder that he was willing to make at that time.
When we interviewed him there, I mean, we did not get a confession from him. He denied it at that point. Even though we knew that we were on the right track, it still takes evidence to put this together.
As detectives work on building their case with Bill still in custody, news spreads quickly about his arrest and possible involvement in the shooting of Joe, Beth, and Dennis.
When I first heard about Bill being a suspect, it sent shivers up my spine because I immediately am flooded with the memories of being in junior high with Bill and having very, very strange interactions with him. I was 13, 14 years old. He at one point stabbed me in the leg with a pencil. He had been open about talking about murder and proceeded to threaten me that if I said anything about it, that he'd kill me and my family. I hadn't seen my dad in years when I went to school with Bill. I don't know how they knew each other.
One question remains for police. If Bill murdered the Wellnitzes, what was his motive? Detectives learn another piece of shocking information when Regina tells them Bill might have pulled the trigger, but someone else masterminded the killings.
She did share with us that Meg had been involved in the planning of this murder and that she had wanted it done. Certainly that was shocking to everybody. She said that Meg had ridden with Bill Meese from Lexington down to Columbia late night, early morning when these murders occurred.
Meg was a big part of the planning and execution of the plan at her parents' house. What we also learned is that they had been planning this 3 months prior to the murders before they did it. We believed at this time that Meg and Bill Meese were the ones responsible for the murders. We had ruled out Regina and Randy Appleton at this time. It was a bombshell for us to learn that information. I couldn't believe it. Totally unexpected.
"10 years after Joe, Beth, and Dennis Wellnitz were shot in cold blood, police now believe Meg Wellnitz wanted her parents dead and asked her friend Bill Meese to kill them.
Based upon my prior history with Meg Wellnitz, I would have never dreamed that she would have been involved in that murder of her parents and sibling. She had become that type of person, not the one that I knew from before. And now all of a sudden I see her in a completely different light when she has no compassion for life.
Before they can lay charges, detectives need hard evidence against Meg and Bill.
One of the things that we learned during the investigation, they had purchased a 9mm high-power Browning automatic. We knew they had done that. They used a false ID and they used it to make the purchase of the gun. We were able to learn that through a report from ATF, and we actually identified who sold that gun to them, and that the person that sold it to them actually identified Meg and Bill as being the ones that came in.
On February 27, 2003, detectives finally have the evidence they need.
This case was presented to an Adair County grand jury, and the grand jury indicted both Meg Wellnitz and Bill Meese.
Meg is arrested at her home in Lexington, but refuses to speak to police. Bill, who is serving a 12-year sentence for the murder for hire plot, is ready to talk.
During his statement, he certainly indicated to us Meg Wellnitz was involved in the planning. This was done at her urging. This was her idea, and that she wanted it done.
We agreed that she wanted to have her parents killed. She claimed the estate was worth $1 million. She would give me 10% of that estate in exchange for killing her parents.
We had the motivation being money. What we learned was that Meg and Bill drove from Lexington that morning down to Columbia, and that Meg gave Bill the key to the front door. She stays in the car. She does not go in the house.
I walked through the house, the back room. Joe came out of the back room. I engaged him, fired on him. He came toward me and I continued firing. He fell. I went upstairs, into the hall. Elizabeth was standing next to her bed. I engaged and fired on her. She fell. I came back down the hall. I entered Dennis's room. He was sitting on his bed. I engaged him. I emptied the magazine of weapons. He was still sitting up at that time. He got on the floor. He got on the floor and I shot him. I then went into the back bedroom and into the closet and got the firebox. Took the box down to the car. Took off the clothes I was wearing. I put all of those items as well as the firearm and 3 magazines in a black plastic trash bag. I put the black trash bag in the trash container and drove back to that. We got back to like about 6:30 or 7:30.
It truly was a chilling account of just how cold-hearted he was, not only in doing it, but in talking about it.
Police confront Meg with Bill's confession.
She agreed to then give a statement. When we met with Meg, you know, my observation and my perception of her demeanor and her statements to us certainly was not one of any remorse. It was a matter-of-fact description of what she had done some years prior in having her family killed.
I don't think I could have ever thought of Meg committing a murder or being a part of a murder plan. I know that life insurance might seem like a lot of money, but when you put that cost on lives, it's nothing. Like it's unfathomable to think that she considered their lives that invaluable.
Bill Meese was convicted by a jury of 3 counts of murder, robbery, and burglary, and he was sentenced to death. Meg Wellnitz was convicted of complicity to 3 counts of murder, complicity to robbery, and complicity to burglary, and she received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 25 years.
It's very disturbing to know that this little sweet girl that I remember has been the one that actually played such a big role in this murder. Meg orchestrated one of the most horrendous crimes that you could imagine, killing your mom and dad and also your brother.
I do not think that Meg receiving 25 years was a just sentence. I think she was as guilty as Bill Meese, and I think she should have been given the same type of sentence as Bill Meese, death.
For their daughter to have been the killer was about the most unexpected thing. It was such a shock to try to wrap your head around how could a daughter carry out or be the mastermind. It does not get any more heartless than that, and it does not get any more sickening than that. She didn't deserve to ever be free again.
In 2014, having served 8 years of her life sentence, Meg is found dead in her cell of an apparent suicide.
I certainly could never have imagined that things would have turned out this way. I just feel sad that Joe wasn't able to live out his life the way that he deserved to and continue to give back to the community that he was a part of and be a father to Dennis and to Meg even. I wish I had gotten to spend more time with him.
It's just hard to understand sometimes why things happen and why they had to lose their lives in that way when they had so much ahead of them. It was a very tragic ending.
The community lost a cherished family. I mean, we miss them as friends. We miss them as part of the community. They were just fine folks.
A loving mother with a selfless spirit.
I remember her laughter. You could hear Mother laughing from 2 rooms away.
She was really representative of the goodness in people. She loved her community. They loved her.
Is stabbed to death in a horrifying attack.
It was gruesome crime scene. There was a lot of blood.
The perpetrator left the victim with a 2-pronged serving fork sticking out of her throat.
The amount of devastation led us to believe that it definitely was a crime of passion.
Suspicion falls on those closest to her.
He was the husband that last saw her alive. He didn't really show any signs of grieving.
He failed the polygraph.
My first thought was that it was a domestic assault.
Her son had an argument with his mother that morning.
A neighbor had seen a teenager running away from the home that day.
Months go by without an arrest.
We kept wondering, why is it so hard to capture a murderer in this small town?
Then, just as the case is in danger of going cold, police uncover a dire warning.
The note threatened more violence.
That leads to a deranged killer no one could have predicted.
Wow, we didn't see that coming.
Shenandoah, Iowa is a close-knit farming community home to just 5,500 people.
Shenandoah is your typical small town. It's just beautiful. The corn surrounding the towns. Everybody knows one another. You just are almost shocked at how nice folks are.
It's a small, peaceful community. People know their neighbors, take care of each other. You don't have a lot of violent crime of any nature.
The peace is shattered on September 6, 1988, when police get a disturbing call from local pastor Robert Borton at 3:40 p.m. He tells police his wife of 19 years, Cindy, is dead.
He found her body in the kitchen, lying in a pool of her own blood. He called authorities, who arrived immediately and kept him outside of the house.
It was a gruesome crime scene. We found a female on the kitchen floor. There was a lot of blood everywhere. This person had been stabbed many, many times.
The perpetrator left the victim lying on her back in a pool of blood with a two-pronged serving fork sticking out of her throat. That image stayed with me because it was remarkable in its gruesomeness. There were 4 instruments that appeared to come from her kitchen that were weapons of convenience for the killer.
There were 2 forks, a large 2-pronged fork, a 4-pronged fork, as well as 2 knives. There was a struggle. There were some cuts on her hand where she had fought the person and she had tried to get away from the person. The phone had been ripped off of the wall, and it was obvious that a lot of activity went on while Cindy was being killed.
Detectives observe that the pool of blood is not yet dry, meaning the murder likely happened in the late morning or early afternoon.
In addition to the blood in the kitchen, there were also some blood stains found in the bathroom.
It was obvious that the person had cleaned up in the bathroom because there wasn't any visible pools of blood, just blood that looked like it had been washed off of hands or clothing. We did not have the benefit of DNA testing back in the 80s. Blood would have been collected still because you can type the blood, and that was what was one thing that we'd be looking at. And of course, fingerprints obviously throughout the crime scene.
There was no forced entry. We were 99% sure that she knew who the perpetrator was. My first thought was that it was a family assault.
The amount of devastation that was there at the crime scene led us to believe that it definitely was a crime of passion.
Detectives had to speak with Cindy's husband, Robert, but are beaten to it by a new arrival at the scene, the couple's 18-year-old son.
I seen an ambulance parked in front of my house, and my father was leaning against the front of my mother's car crying, and I just knew deep down inside me that my world was never going to be the same. I dropped my backpack there in the middle of the yard and went running up to my father, and he then informed me that Mama was gone.
39-year-old Cynthia Borden was a born and bred Iowa girl. She and her brother were raised by loving parents just outside Des Moines.
My mother and my uncle would always tell me about the adventures that they had around the farm. Life was good for them. Everybody had to laugh, according to Mama. I remember her laughter. You could hear Mother laughing from 2 rooms away. You would have to rush in there to find out what it was that was so funny that made Mama laugh.
As a teen, Cindy worked at a local restaurant and soon after would meet her future husband.
My father wound up coming in there and doing the whole phone number exchange thing, and then they started going out, and one thing led to another.
The couple married in 1969. When the family moved to Shenandoah, Cindy had her hands full.
Mama just kind of assumed the role of the pastor's wife. She also worked at a donut place there. Mama always did what she had to do to take care of the family. I was her everything. I was very much a mama's boy. My mother was love personified.
Cindy's warm heart also extended to those outside the family.
Mama always had an open door policy for all of my friends. They always knew that my mother was there to be a second mother to them, somebody that they could talk to, that she never passed judgment on anybody. She was also very good with giving out the hugs. Mama was always there to give you a hand back up if life knocked you down.
Cindy loved her community. They loved her. She was really representative of a small town in Iowa, the goodness in people.
Cindy's death leaves many in the community wondering who could have killed her. Investigators have an idea on where to start.
Back in that time, about 85% of all homicides in the state of Iowa were committed by someone close to the victim. A husband is always a major suspect at the time we see a homicide like this, especially one with so much rage involved.
Robert was interviewed and gave the following timeline. He had gone to work that morning at Select Motors, where he was a part-time worker because preaching to a small rural congregation is not lucrative employment. Robert returned home at noon, as was his habit. His wife served him spaghetti for lunch, and at 1 o'clock he returned to work. Cindy worked at a local bakery. Her shift was to start at 2 o'clock that day. When she didn't show up for work, her employer became concerned and called Robert. He indicated that he thought perhaps she had simply taken a nap and overslept. Approximately an hour or so later, when she still had not shown up for work, he got the second phone call from his wife's employer. He went home at about 3:30 in the afternoon to discover Cindy dead on the kitchen floor.
What Robert says he did next raises a red flag to detectives.
After finding his wife and then calling to get some help, he took the dog out instead of, being there for his wife or trying to do something for his wife. He said he wanted it to be tied up so that the ambulance people wouldn't have to deal with his pets. That was very unusual and very strange.
Then, Robert offers up a theory investigators find completely ludicrous.
Bob was saying that his wife could have just tripped and fell onto this fork. That was totally not plausible. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. It's just, I can't imagine anyone ending up in a situation, and certainly not with the amount of blood that was found there at the scene too.
He thought that it was an accident. And that really raised eyebrows. How could you possibly think that someone had just fallen? You just think, well, this is someone who snapped.
Bob Borton was our prime suspect immediately after the death of Cynthia Borton because, first of all, he was the last person to see her alive. And then he also was the one that found her.
Coming up, suspicion swells around Cindy's husband.
His work clothing was laundered before investigators had an opportunity to examine it for blood spatter.
What does Robert Borton have to hide?
The only thing I want him to say is, I did it.
While police dig for evidence against their top suspect, a threatening clue sends shockwaves through the town.
There were a great many different and wild rumors, leaving notes at the scene. Cynthia Borton ain't nothing compared to what's coming. And hints such as the NS Night Stalker.
This story just got even more crazy and more sensational and more scary.
Police in Shenandoah, Iowa are investigating the gruesome murder of 39-year-old Cynthia Borton. Her husband Robert's erratic behavior is putting him in detective spotlight.
Robert commented that his wife had simply fallen on a serving fork and died an accidental death. These comments were certainly unusual and suspicious.
Police bring Robert to the station for a formal interview.
Bob did have a very strange personality and strange mannerisms about him when he was interviewed. He didn't really show any signs of grieving. You would have expected that a man having just lost his wife would be very emotional at the time he was being interviewed, but we didn't see that with Bob Borton. He was very matter-of-fact. He was just so casual in talking even about finding his wife. He acted like that was just an everyday thing. You know, it was just like talking about, well, what's the weather going to be like today?
Detectives question Robert about his relationship with Cindy.
He told us about, having arguments once in a while. He went in kind of a defensive mode about the questioning. When they're reacting like that, it does put up a red flag like that.
Investigators try to provoke a telling reaction out of Robert.
He didn't get upset when I accused him of being the one responsible for his wife's death. He didn't show sadness, he didn't cry.
His stoic but unemotional denials only increased their suspicions.
At that point in time, Bob Borton couldn't be held at all. We had no evidence to show that he was responsible. We had no information other than his matter-of-fact attitude.
Robert provides fingerprint samples, but with nothing concrete linking him to the murder, investigators must let him go.
This, frankly, was frustrating to some of the investigators involved in the case.
Cindy's body has been sent to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. While police wait to learn a specific time of death, they look to verify Robert's whereabouts.
His boss alibied him for the time that he said that he was at work that day.
Knowing it's still possible Robert killed Cindy when he went home on his lunch break at noon, what his boss tells detectives next rings alarm bells.
He changed his clothes when he went back to work.
Before the body was found, he dropped off his work clothing. It was laundered before investigators had an opportunity to examine it for blood spatter.
Had this all been part of Robert's well-executed plan?
There isn't always transfer of blood from a victim to a perpetrator, even in an extremely bloody killing such as this one. But of course, the likelihood that there would be made it important to examine the clothing, and that was impossible because those clothes, as it happened, were very quickly laundered.
That certainly was a little detail that made us think that it was him.
Investigators conducted a great deal of background interviews with neighbors, friends, co-workers.
We did look into the relationship between Robert and Cynthia Borton to see if it was a good marriage. And we did determine that they did have some problems. Everything wasn't roses and everything wasn't as you might think.
There was quarreling in the house. We thought maybe he had a lot of rage that he wanted to get rid of, and he was taking it out on Cindy. But we had never been called there for family disturbance or anything.
Needing to verify information about Cindy and Robert's relationship, detectives seek out their son, John, but the teen has vanished.
On the day she passed, all I did was shut down. My best friend, Jim, and his mother and father came driving by in their car and attempted to speak with me. I was not in the mood to talk, and then I just kept on walking.
When John arrives back home that night, detectives are there waiting.
They wanted everything that I could tell them while it was still all fresh in my mind. My father and I were still of the impression that it could have been accidental.
When asked about his parents' relationship, John admits there were problems.
There was some disagreements and a little bit of an argument, and then they realized that could I actually find anybody better for me? The answer they came up with was no, so it's like, we were happy one time. We need to figure this out, get it worked out. That whole part of the wedding vows of till death do us part, they both took that very seriously.
John is too upset to say much more. Police end their conversation, but plan to talk with him again when he's less distraught. Officers are then dispatched to canvass the area around the Borton home.
They talk to the neighbors and try to find out if there's anybody who witnessed anything suspicious.
A neighbor had seen a teenager running away from the home that day, actually in the afternoon.
The neighbor's description of the teen sounds strikingly familiar.
John Borton, Cynthia's son, fit the description of the person that had run away from the house.
Had John come home early from school to murder his own mother?
It was a fascinating story. It was a mystery. He seemed like your typical teenager.
Bob Borton and also John Borton were the main and only suspects.
That in itself was the shocking part.
Detectives investigating the vicious slaying of Cynthia Borton have two prime suspects. Her husband, Robert, who found her dead, and now their 18-year-old son, who matches the description of a teen seen fleeing the area around the time of the murder.
John Borton, even though he was scheduled to have been at school that day, might have come home early. So John Borton early on was a person that we wanted to talk with and get more details about where he was on that day.
The day after the murder, John is brought to the police department for another interview.
They started with the questions about the home life and everything else. I told them my mother was literally my whole world.
When detectives asked John about the last time he saw his mother, he makes a startling admission.
John indicated in his interview that he had had an argument with his mother that morning. That, of course, was interesting and relevant information.
Mother and I did disagree because I was not in the mood to go to school that day. My last words to my mother that day were a bit harsh. I have zero pride or pleasure that I can take from that particular morning.
John maintains he was at school the entire day, but he didn't have any classes between noon and 3 p.m., the approximate window of time when detectives suspect Cindy was murdered.
The whole tone of the investigation changed. They were considering me personally to be a suspect. Who on earth could think that I would do this to my mother?
In a household with 3 people, the 2 surviving occupants would always be interviewed and looked at to see if they had an alibi.
We tried to determine with anybody at the school to make sure that they saw him there and to make sure that he was, in fact, in school, not just that he was supposed to be in school, but that people actually did see him there during that day.
Investigators took aside 2 of John's friends, Jim and Jackson, to find out if there was anything that might cause them to be concerned about John as a suspect.
The teens can't confirm John was at school the entire day, but they're adamant he's not the killer.
One of the first people to console him about his mother's death was Jim Bettis.
Friends of John Borton said Cynthia Borton's murder had been true devastation for John.
I heard some of my teachers kind of speaking in kind of a low, hushed tone thing, that the detectives had come by and questioned them as to whether or not I was actually at school. Could anybody verify that I was there all day like I was supposed to be? Eventually, they were able to reconstruct my alibi for the entire afternoon.
Detectives talked with his teachers who verified that he had spent that full day at school.
Cynthia's son John is ruled out as a suspect. 3 days later, the autopsy report comes in and police look for any insight into what exactly happened that gruesome day.
Cindy suffered a horrifying death. The medical examiner found that Cindy had been stabbed 29 times with at least 4 different instruments, 2 knives and 2 serving forks. In addition to stab wounds that directly led to her death by puncturing vital organs, she had defensive wounds on her hands and forearms. She struggled with her assailant. She had to know that she was dying at the hands of her killer.
The autopsy report also provides a detail crucial to the investigation.
Based upon his finding of a stomach full of completely undigested spaghetti, the medical examiner estimated the time of death as 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Cindy and Robert had shared a meal of spaghetti between 12 and 1 o'clock. Robert placed himself in that home alone in his wife's company at the estimated time of death.
It really made Bob Borton our prime suspect. He was the husband that last saw her alive. He was the husband that was the first to find her dead on the kitchen floor. He and his wife had had difficulties throughout their marriage, had had problems.
Investigators decided that it was important to keep working on Robert. He was really their only feasible suspect.
Based on the findings of the autopsy report and mounting circumstantial evidence, Robert is called back in for another interview.
One of our agents was very aggressive in interrogating Bob Borton about his wife's murder and accusing him of being the murderer. And Bob, again, sat very calm and still and was not irate about being accused of having taken his wife's life. The investigators decided to give me a call and ask me to conduct a polygraph examination of Bob Borton and do that right away before he had a chance to think twice about it. The relevant questions that I've asked Bob Borton is, were you responsible for your wife's death? Did you cause your wife's death? Did you stab your wife? He was just very humdrum, very relaxed, and very, well, I guess, you'll have to do what you have to do because I didn't do it.
The polygraph results tell a different story.
He failed the polygraph. The results were that he was lying and that he was culpable in this crime. So investigators were, in fact, increasingly convinced that Robert had killed his wife.
One week after the gruesome murder of Cindy Borton, her husband Robert, the prime suspect in her murder, has just failed a polygraph.
When I did see those results, the thing that next happens is for me to go in and interrogate him and try to determine why he was being deceptive. I needed to try to get a confession from him. When I confronted him with the results of the polygraph examination, he didn't shake his head no that he didn't do it. He didn't try to respond to me in any way, shape, or form. He just basically sat in a chair and didn't move. The only thing I want him to say is, I did it. And so we were very aggressive in interrogating Bob Borton about his wife's murder.
Robert Borton never wavered in his denial that he was responsible for this.
Robert's behavior under questioning becomes even more unusual.
He did, in fact, fall asleep in the chair. only time that anybody has ever fallen asleep in the middle of one of my interrogations. Bob Borton's reactions were not what we would have considered to be normal.
Despite failing the polygraph, the evidence against Robert is purely circumstantial, so detectives have no choice but to let him go.
At that point in time, we're thinking we must have missed something. There must be something more involved that we're not aware of.
The lack of an arrest unsettles the town further.
The people of the community really are concerned when there is an immediate suspect why that person's not apprehended and taken to jail. But we need more information. We need more evidence.
The members of the community were increasingly convinced that Robert had killed his wife. They expressed those concerns. They brought a great deal of pressure on the chief of police.
The public was just as anxious to get it solved as the police was. We wanted to get this case cleared up so gossip and things would die down after, of course, this happened. He wasn't preaching for a while, and then people just quit attending.
There was a real change my father noticed. People who were open and friendly with him, all of a sudden, they quite often would go as far as to cross the street so that they would not have to walk near him, would not have to speak with him. I did my best to at least attempt to continue my life as well as I could.
Laying Cindy to rest is tough on the young teen.
The only time I can remember my mother having a brand new dress was the one bought for her to bury her in. It's the only brand new dress I ever recall her having.
2 months after Cindy's murder, Robert and John leave Shenandoah.
It was unbearable for my father to continue to live there. People who he thought had been friends before had shut him out.
He moved to a town 3 hours away, and we watched his movements, where he went, who he was meeting with.
The police were really struggling because they had nothing. They had no one else.
2.5 months later, when the state crime lab sends investigators the results of the fingerprint analysis, they hope it'll be the crucial evidence for which they've been waiting.
Robert's fingerprints were not found on any of the murder weapons or the phone. This, frankly, was frustrating to some of the investigators involved in the case. It was solid evidence that someone other than Robert Borton was very possibly the guilty party in this murder.
The news is a huge blow to the investigation.
It's concerning whenever cases are not immediately solvable, and as time passes, the prospects for solving them become smaller and smaller.
We just waited for authorities to make an arrest. And when they didn't make an arrest in the months that were going by, that's when we started to realize this is somebody that they don't know who it is.
3 months after the murder, as detectives redouble their efforts to unearth new suspects, another crime in Shenandoah comes to their attention.
In the weeks preceding and following the murder of Cindy Borton, there were arsons in the town of Shenandoah. Even though arson is a different crime than murder, it's a violent crime. And when one has a series of violent crimes, in this case, the arsons and a murder, all occurring within a matter of weeks, it would be only normal to at least examine the possibility of a connection between the two.
On November 30th, another arson occurs, and a clue found at the scene leaves investigators stunned.
The arsonist left a note referring to the 2 prior arsons and Cynthia Borton, and in fact threatened more violence in that community, saying that the arsons and Cindy Borton ain't nothing compared to what's coming.
Oh my gosh, this story just got even more crazy and more sensational and more scary.
Detectives hunting the killer of Cindy Borton have just received a mysterious clue linking her murder to a series of arson fires across town.
There was a note that was, in fact, very intriguing, and the note referred to all three arsons and Cindy Borton, obviously raising the possibility that the perpetrator of the arsons was also the perpetrator of the Cindy Borton murder. The note in question was signed the Night Stalker, NS, which copied the name of a highly publicized murderer in California.
At the time, the Night Stalker had already been arrested, so this was clearly a copycat killer.
It was rather apparent that the perpetrator was someone who used that name out of convenience and imitation.
He was calling himself the Night Stalker. Wow, he's just crazy.
There were a great many different and wild rumors, leaving notes at the scene and hints such as the NS Night Stalker were quite possibly a cry for attention. This would have to be investigated. The note was examined for fingerprints, and indeed some latent fingerprint ridge detail was found on the note.
The prints are sent to the crime lab for analysis.
It was important not only to continue investigating the murder, but also to investigate the arsons for purpose of developing a suspect on the murder. There had been 3 arsons in the community. One had been at the Broad Street School. The letters NS were found slashed on a bridge near the Broad Street School fire.
There was another fire set in a school teacher's pickup, and there was a note, "The Night Stalker strikes again."
This case was a genuine whodunit. Even though we had the Night Stalker note, investigators didn't know who had authored it or who had committed the arsons.
I never really would have expected this case to go where it went. You know, it wasn't something that we expected from the beginning at all.
Several days later, detectives get the fingerprint results from the note, and they don't match back to anyone in their database.
There was, in fact, a killer at loose in their community.
As every week went by, and then the months, we kept wondering, why is it so hard to capture a murderer in this small town who committed a murder in such a shocking, unbelievable manner?
On January 31st, 1989, police finally get a break in the case.
5 months after this murder, a young man named Jackson, a high school student, came into the police department and informed authorities that the previous day he'd had a visit from a friend, another teenager, and that in the course of their afternoon visiting with each other, this friend had told him that he had some very shocking information and something that was bothering him. More specifically, that he had murdered Cindy Borton. This information was a shock that shed an entirely new light on the investigation.
When Jackson came into the Shenandoah Police Department, yes, that definitely was a big break. His friend had told him things that happened at the crime scene that only the killer would know.
Jackson's friend described the murder that he had committed and even went so far as to draw a small diagram indicating exactly where the body had been left in the house. Jackson shared this drawing as well with the authorities, which was important and surprising because it appeared quite accurate.
He told Jackson, "I'm going to show you where the knife is." And he did that. And that's when Jackson realized, oh, he's really done this. And later that day, even though he was sworn to secrecy, he thought about his own mom and how the killer had been a guest in their house. And he thought, wow, that could have been my mom. So it wasn't hard for him to go to the police after that.
At this point, investigators were aware that Jackson had indeed very likely spoken to Cindy Borton's murderer.
Jackson said that James Bettis was the one responsible for killing Cynthia Borton.
Jim Bettis was a close friend of John Borton. They were classmates until Jimmy dropped out of high school. He was close enough to John and interacted with the Bortons so much that Cindy was very involved in Jim's life. He even thought of Cindy as a second mother to him. She tried to help him, tried to persuade him to return to school and get an education. She was a very good friend and mother figure to the young man. Jim was certainly not a suspect up to this point, but his statement to Jackson rang true.
It was amazement at that point in time because we talked to James Bettis previously. James Bettis became the prime suspect because of his admissions to his friend, but we need more corroboration. Jim was taken to the Shenandoah Police Department and he was interviewed. Jim did confess to the arsons, as a matter of fact, but denied ever having said anything to Jackson about Cynthia Borton's murder or having any involvement in Cynthia Borton's murder.
Jim agrees to have his fingerprints collected. He's also willing to undergo a polygraph.
During the polygraph examination, the questions I was asked were, was he involved in the death of Cynthia Borton, specifically whether he was the one that committed the crime.
Jimmy Bettis insisted throughout that he did not kill Cindy Borton.
When I quantified the polygraph examinations and I actually gave a numerical figure to each of his reactions, if they're over a -6, that strongly indicates to us that he's deceptive. James Bettis came up a -23. So there is absolutely no question he was specifically was the one involved in Cynthia Borton's murder.
It was a big shock, and it really left us, and I think everyone, scratching their head. Wow, we didn't see that coming.
Five months after the horrific slaying of Cindy Borton, detectives get their biggest break when her son's friend fails a polygraph.
Jim Bettis's polygraph, according to Agent McCleary, showed deception on his denial that he had murdered Cindy Borton.
It was very unusual that all of a sudden this person would become a suspect who was a teenager, and also he was good friends with Cynthia's son. And he had been in Cynthia's house many occasions.
Investigators confront Jim with the results.
The very next thing I said was, we all know exactly what happened on September 6th. You were the one responsible for having killed Cynthia Borton. There's no question in anybody's mind now. And he came out and said, I did it. Okay, I did it.
Jim Bettis had not been on our radar at all. We never dreamed that he might be capable of something like this.
James Bettis told me that on September 6th of 1988, he was walking around town, he was thinking about his father. He was thinking about how he hated his father.
His dad was always telling him that he was no good, he wasn't going to amount to anything. It was terrible. He hated his dad.
He needed to be able to get that rage out. And how he was going to do that was by seeing if he could actually kill.
His statement was that he wanted to kill his father, but that he knew he couldn't get that job done, and so he killed someone who was far more vulnerable, and that Cynthia Borton was a victim of convenience.
Police believe Jim showed up at the Borton household, just narrowly missing Robert, who had gone back to work after lunch.
Cynthia Borton answered the door and allowed him to come in because he had been there many times previously.
During his confession, Jimmy Bettis indicated that he had asked Cindy for a glass of water, which led her to walk into the kitchen. He followed her there, approaching her from behind, and grabbing a knife, immediately slashed her throat from behind. He stated he had used a pocket knife of his own in addition to Cynthia Borton's kitchen utensils. And that after the crime, he took his pocket knife, stained with Cindy Borton's blood, and threw it under a bridge. This was important information. It would corroborate his confession if in fact that knife could be found, and if in fact it had Cindy Borton's blood on it. Investigators scoured the area, found the knife where Jimmy Bettis described that they would find it, and when it was tested at the laboratory, indeed it had not only Cindy Borton's blood, but also Jimmy Bettis's fingerprint.
On February 2nd, 1989, detectives charge 18-year-old Jim Bettis with first-degree murder and 3 counts of arson.
The investigator told me that Jim had been arrested and he had confessed repeatedly. My first response was, no, he did not do this. He was my best friend. He was the first person that I trusted that was not an actual blood relative. It occurred to me that in at least some way I am responsible for this because I am the reason that he came into my house, that he was accepted into my house, and my mother is gone. There is nothing I can do to get her back.
At trial, Jim is convicted, and on November 13th, 1989, he's sentenced to life in prison.
Jimmy Bettis was a very troubled and angry and rage-filled young man. Had this crime not been solved when it was, there's every reason to be concerned that there would have been more fires, if not more murders.
My best friend committed this heinous crime of murder against somebody who trusted him, supported him, and cared for him. He frequently told me that we were brothers forever, and I honestly felt the same thing for him. And then for him to turn around and do such a horrific action, there is a bit of relief knowing that he will never be out again for the rest of his life. I want as many people as possible to know and understand what a wonderful, wonderful person my mother was, which is why I share her with as many people as I possibly can. I only miss her on days that end in Y. I am still waiting for my pain to go away. I don't know that it ever will.